Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this planning meeting of Melton Borough Council. I am Councillor Alan Thwaites, the Chair of Planning. Just some housekeeping. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phone to silent during this meeting. We will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members speaking, please raise your hand if you wish to speak and speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Please remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. I'd like to introduce those present this evening. The members here this evening are, to my right, Councillors Pip Elnut, Ian Atherton, Siggy Atherton, Ronan Brown and Marilyn Gordon. To my left, Councillors James Mason, Margaret Glancy, Pat Cumbers, Lee Higgins and Don Pritchett. We have a team of officers present who are, to my left, Senior Solicitor Tom Pickwell, to my right, Planning Development Manager Louise Parker, Assistant Director for Planning Sarah Legg, Planning Officer Mark Ketley, Rachel Gordon and Amy Smith, not necessarily in that order. We also have our, you can work that yourself. We also have our Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes. That's Ellen Ainge and Sarah Evans. There's no apologies for absence because I think we have a full committee this evening. So I'd like to move on to the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of August. Would anybody like to propose the minutes? Councillor Glancy and seconded by Councillor Mason. Anybody have any comments? Read the minutes? No. In that case, then could I ask for a vote of hands to accept the minutes of the last meeting? Which is unanimous. Thank you. Next, I'd like to move on to the declarations of interest. Siggy, yeah.
Yeah, I've got to declare an interest, even though I'm not the board manager for the Asfordby Road development. I've had involvement with that, so I feel I should step out for that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody, Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, I've had involvement because I went there yesterday and I went round some of the houses to view it, but I feel I can stay in because I've not done anything or said anything that will make it any difference to what happens tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've all looked at we'll looked at the site in different ways. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, not to declare an interest, but just for housekeeping, I'm conscious lots of emails have come in very recently. While I've read as much as I can, it may have been one or two I may have missed and maybe other colleagues have. So to note for councillors and maybe anyone who's speaking, if we can make sure that members are aware of anything that came in very last minute, that's all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think if there's anything I think that's been said that hasn't been repeated or been said, I'll make sure of that. Any other interest? No. So that's declarations of interest. So therefore, we'll move on to the schedule of applications. And the first application is 22/00590/FUL, which is East End Farm, Wrights Lane, Wymondham. And I'll pass over to Mark for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application in Wymondham is for the development of a former farmstead into 3 residential properties. Members will remember it was presented at the previous meeting on the 1st of August, and it was deferred for 2 reasons. One being to explore the introduction of additional car parking spaces within the site, and secondly to further assess potential impacts arising from privacy from use of adjacent farm or former farm buildings, which are currently in use for hobby workshop purposes. There's a quick refresh for the members. The slide in front of you identifies the application site edged in red. It's on the east side of Wymondham, as we've explained previously. The existing or built development is in the northwest corner of the site, just labelled as existing barns on that grey plan within the red line. There was previously a Dutch barn standing in the central part of the site as well, in between two grain silos, which remain in situ. Members will remember the explanation at the last meeting that a paddock area in the southeast part of the site where two new dwellings were originally proposed to be constructed, they've since been removed from the scheme. The reason being that that part of the site sits outside of the settlement limits for Wymondham as set out in the neighbourhood plan, and hence the construction of two dwellings on that part of the site would have represented a policy conflict. The photographs on the right-hand side of that slide just show the former farm buildings in the northwest corner, which are to be converted. As we explained at the last meeting, the traditional stone and slate properties facing onto Wrights Lane, which is the top right-hand photograph. The second buildings to be converted take the form of certainly the appearance of a former engine shed. They're brick and slate built, and you can see those in the bottom right photograph. Next slide, please. So this is the updated site layout plan following discussions with the applicant about additional car parking provision, and I will come on and explain that in a bit more detail on the next slide. But just to recap in terms of this proposed site layout, the proposal is for two dwellings to be converted from the existing barns in the north west corner, as you can see there. A new build dwelling, which effectively would be a reinstatement of the Dutch barn on almost identical footprint to that which it originally stood. The new build dwellings on the paddock removed from the scheme as shown on the slide and explained earlier, and there are also site access improvements proposed in line with recommendations on a stage 1 road safety audit. So in terms of the changes to the site layout since the last committee meeting, if we just move on to the next slide, I'll be able to talk you through those. So this is the updated site layout plan with the additional car parking. Originally, and as presented at the previous committee meeting, there were 8 car parking spaces in total on site. This has now been increased to 10 in total. So just to talk you through each of those. Within the courtyard area in the central part of the image, there would be 5 spaces. That would be 2 each for the 2 barn conversion units, as well as 1 visitor space, which you can see on the diagram there. And then in relation to the Dutch barn, there will be 3 dedicated spaces for that unit, as well as 2 visitor spaces alongside it. 2 of those resident spaces would be external. The third would be an integral garage that would be of a size that would comply with the minimum size requirements in the Leicestershire Design Guide, and therefore, as such, it is recognised as a dedicated car parking space for that property, in line with the requirements of both our SPD and the Leicestershire County Council Design Guide. There is 1 tandem parking space shown for visitors on the image as well. So just to explain again that both the SPD and the Leicestershire Highway Design Guide do accept and allow for tandem parking where it would be used occasionally for visitor use. Also on this slide, just to explain the privacy issues which we were asked to explore further at the previous meeting. The existing building on the boundary of the site, which is the grey unit on the left-hand side of that image, that's in use as a hobby workshop by the occupiers of number 15 Wrights Lane. There's no recognised commercial use of that building. It is for hobby workshop purposes. There are 3 openings within those buildings which face towards and onto the application site. So I've marked those on that slide with 3 yellow arrows, if members can see that. So the first of those is on the north facing elevation. That's a window which faces or would face into an internal courtyard area that where access to barn conversion unit number 1 would be obtained. Just to explain that would face onto a new 1.5 metre high wall, which would be installed as the entrance and the boundary treatment of barn conversion unit number 1. So there would be no direct looking into the property itself or vice versa. It would face onto the boundary. The second arrow, as we work down the slide from north to south, that again is a window opening that would face directly onto the proposed car parking and courtyard area, as you can see there. And then the bottom arrow, the third opening, that's actually a solid timber door at the moment. It does open out onto the application site, but there is no right of access for the owners and occupiers of number 15 Wrights Lane to actually set foot on the application site itself. So it is effectively a redundant door with no visibility onto the site. If we just move on to the next slide. So these are just the 3D visuals that were presented at the last meeting. So this shows the proposed converted units in the northwest part of the site, very much retaining its engine shed feel and the agricultural origins of those buildings. The next slide is the 3D visual of the proposed Dutch barn reinstatement. So very much a modern and contemporary twist on what was a historical feature within the site, and you'll see from the report that weight is attributed to the reinstatement of that in terms of understanding and appreciating the evolution of the site over the years. So just to conclude and set out the summary, which is contained in detail in the report, if we move on to the next slide, please. The proposal constitutes a housing windfall opportunity that would be commensurate with the scale of the settlement and would make effective use of land that is previously developed. The dwellings would be located entirely within the identified village limits for Wymondham now that the new build dwellings on the paddock area have been removed, and the proposal therefore accords with the neighbourhood plan in that respect. It's considered to be acceptable from a design perspective, as well as in terms of its impacts on heritage, neighbouring residential amenity, and also from a technical and environmental point of view, including highway safety. So the recommendation to members is that the application is approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Do any members have any questions for clarification? Councillor Gordon?
I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring it up, but it's doing number 15. And I'm a little bit worried because his hobby is quite loud with his machinery, and it will cause a lot of disturbance with the new residents that go in. And I remember asking last time if a note could go to the well, by the person that was here that was representing the person, to see whether or not they could build a wall or something to mitigate some of the noise. And I just wondered if there's anything else they can do to make it better for number 15. Because, I mean, he was there already, and that hobby, I believe, has been going on for years, as far as I know. And I just wondered if there's anything being done about that. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to answer. I mean, from my personal point of view, it's a hobby. So therefore, it's not an industrial use. It's not in use for many hours a day, and it would be the new occupants that would possibly be disturbed by that noise. And woodworking is okay, can get noisy, but I think it's acceptable. But that's my opinion. Mark, would you like to answer?
Yes, Chair. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really got anything to add over and above what you've just said. You know, it is used for hobby purposes. It's not a commercial entity, you know, and therefore, you know, the potential impact on the future occupiers of this site, you know, is not at a level where, you know, we believe that there would be sufficient concern.
And Councillor Mason?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the point that Councillor Gordon's making regarding people moving in to the premise, perhaps the lawyer amongst us could just refresh our memories about moving to a private nuisance, because that what it would be. And it's my understanding that you can't move somewhere and then claim a nuisance of an existing area.
I think Councillor Mason is referring to the coming to the nuisance defence. There is updated case law on that. I don't intend to go into that now because it's quite a complex subject and not really relevant to this committee. But yes, there's a whole case law area on that specifically.
Councillor Siggy-Atherton.
Yeah, question regarding the garage. Do you have the size for the minimum standard that is required, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The minimum size requirement, which is in the Leicestershire Highway Design Guide and cross-referenced in the Council's own SPD, is the minimum size has to be 6x3. In this particular case, the garage is 6x4, so it exceeds the minimum size requirement.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Mark. In that case, then, oh, sorry, sorry, Don, I didn't see you.
It's okay. No, I was going last minute. Condition 10.4. I'll repeat what I said at the last meeting. It's rather limiting to.
Is this a question for clarification?
Yeah, we wanted the wood and the aluminium is rather restrictive in this day and age in terms of there's lots of design opportunities and better lifelong materials. And I think you were looking at a broader recommendation on that one, that you had something down for the last meeting. And I think you sent it out by email at the time after the question and answer the Monday before. So I'm saying I don't think it should be just wooden or aluminium windows. It's a broader, and that needs to comply as well with 8.7.
Yeah, so we'll just check that the conditions that were put on it, is that now in the conditions? Has that been amended?
Yeah, Chair, our recommendation remains the condition as set out in the report originally. The reason for that is, it has been recommended by the Conservation Officer in recognition of the role that these buildings perform in terms of the character and the appearance of the conservation area, and particularly the historical setting of Wrights Lane. However, should members, be minded to agree with Councillor Pritchard's concern, we do have the wording of an alternative condition that perhaps allows a little bit more flexibility on the future use of the window and door materials.
To go with that one rather than restrict it to wood.
Okay, we'll put that into the debate. Yeah. Any other questions? No. In that case, then I'd like to call forward James Bottesford from HSSP Architects, the agent talking forward. Thank you for coming along again. And if you remember the instructions, you have 3 minutes. Tom will give you a warning for 30 seconds from the end. And if you could start closing that point, that would be great. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm James Bottesford, one of the directors of HSSP Architects. First, I'd like to give apologies to my colleague, Richard Johnson. Richard is the project architect with this application. If you recall, Richard was the gentleman that presented to you at last month's planning committee. Richard's on holiday, so I'm speaking really on his behalf. However, I was at the planning committee last month. I was speaking on another application, so I was well aware of the concerns that the committee raised, and I'm fully aware of the reasons why the application was deferred. Regarding the parking, I think it's worth noting that the scheme that was presented to this committee last month did actually have a compliant parking layout. The parking layout that was presented did meet the requirements of the Leicestershire Highways Guide and also Melton's parking standards under their SPD. However, we were happy to take on board the comments and concerns, and we've worked quite hard over the last 2 to 3 weeks with Mark to deliver the 2 extra parking spaces which were requested. We've accommodated those successfully within the site, and they've now been allocated as visitor spaces. So hopefully the committee will appreciate that work, and we'll be happy with the layout that we've proposed. Other concerns regarding privacy, which Mark's touched on already this evening. We've again looked at that in some detail over the last few weeks, and we've obviously satisfied Mark that the openings don't overlook any privacy issues regarding our site and the neighbour's site. And the proposed the windows that are on that existing outbuilding don't look into any private amenity space, or they don't look into any new proposed windows. We've touched on noise. I don't really have a lot to add to what Mark's conclusion is on the noise that's just been discussed to the neighbour. And however, I'm happy to answer any questions which any of the committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions that they would like to ask of the agent? No? Thank you very much for your time. In that case, then I'd like to open this for debate. Would anybody like to make a comment? Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members and the speaker and the previous speakers when it was first heard. Some councillors and officers or remember a former councillor, Councillor Holmes, would turn around when deferments were made, and she would say a statement. She said many things, Councillor Holmes did, but she would say a statement which was, sometimes it's better to defer and it comes back better. I, as the proposer for the deferment, I wasn't While I didn't think it was necessarily strong enough to refuse, because I think, as the speaker had said, it potentially was compliant. I think sometimes as planning members, and I know planning officers think this as well, we have to try and envisage how people will live on the site as well. And we try and get that as best we can within the confines of what government sets, because that's the issue of the planning system. And we're not going to change that. But I'd like to thank Mark for the work, and I'd like to thank the applicant and the agent for what they have done. I think it has alleviated my concerns. Obviously, I made some comments. You could have totally redesigned it and all the other stuff, so I was never going to ask for that. And a lot of work had gone in on there. So I think it's satisfied. Albeit there's the constraints of the site per se, I think there are going to be some ability for visitors to go on the site and work with the residents that will occupy it. And I did raise privacy as I wasn't satisfied that I could accept the privacy arguments at last time. And I think Mark's done very well to explain that to me and maybe to other colleagues. And I think the question to Tom as well. And I'd like to thank the neighbour for how he conveyed his concerns about the privacy as well. But privacy is measured by national policies as well. So I'm sure that will go forward. So as the proposer of that, and I know the ward councillor is here observing as well, and yeah, it's probably his one of the first ones in his ward. So many happy returns when they come in the ward. But yes, I think the strength of it has been the planning committee's deferment of it. So thank you very much for all that, officers and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll agree. And I'll just add the comment there. You can't move next to a farm and then complain about the smell. But Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Higgins, are you proposing? Okay, I'll propose that we recommend approval.
Thank you.
I just want to make that explanation on that, please. Subject to the condition that Councillor Pritchard has asked to be put in. That's okay. So if officers could help me with that, the wording, Mark, yeah. But just really to make the explanation is there's a couple of things raised at the last meeting. One is around the flooding by the Parish Council. That can't be improved upon because Severn Trent have said they're happy with the way that that's been addressed, and that'll be discharged, etc. as the application progresses and is built out. We have had the extra car parking that's increased. We've debated this at length at the last meeting. I don't think we need to put everybody else through the pain of that again. And obviously the interest parties have obviously could have come tonight and said their bit. And secondly, the privacy issue has been dealt with. So I want to propose it with the amendment, which is Ziggy's going to write that. Let me. Which one is it, Ziggy?
Windows and doors should be installed.
Oh yeah. Thereafter, all windows and doors should be installed in strict accordance with the approved details and thereafter maintained as such. Okay.
Yeah, shall I ask Louise to actually outline the change to the terms?
Yeah, so last time there was a request for the condition to be more fluid in terms of alternative materials to come forward. So I think last time we suggested no development shall take place until details of the materials to be used for all windows and doors to be installed in the dwellings hereby permitted have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Thereafter, all windows and doors shall be installed in strict accordance with the approved details and thereafter maintained as such. And we put the reason for that was to ensure a satisfactory standard of external appearance and to ensure that the development is in accordance with policies D1 and EN13 of the Melton Local Plan.
That's acceptable for your proposal?
Yeah, that's acceptable. Yeah. And apologies, I've been working all day, so I haven't seen my emails. So.
Happens to the worst of us, yeah. Councillor Mason, you were second, yeah. Is there anybody else would wish to ask any comments before we move on then? In that case, then we have a proposal to accept the application is seconded. Can I ask those that would vote to accept the application? Again, unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think, thank you, Mark. You're going to go for your 4-hour drive. So thank you, and thank you everyone for that. I'd therefore like to move on to application 20/00388 which is the field OS 4930 Normanton Lane, Bottesford. I believe we're going to talk to Rachel, is going to present this one. Welcome to the committee, by the way.
Thank you, Chair. So the application you have in front of you is an outline application for a residential development of up to 215 dwellings with access to be considered now. The site is mainly contained within allocated site Bot 3, which you can see on the screen now. Also outline the site boundary in red, the conservation area and the other land that is in the applicant's ownership. Can I have the next slide, please? And the next slide, please. Appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are reserved for subsequent applications. The principal vehicular access to the development would be via a new road along the disused railway line connecting with Austin Lane. An existing bridge along the entrance route is to be replaced with a new bridge. Next slide, please. I've put the flood map on here, which shows that the site lies predominantly within flood zone 1. The full infrastructure contributions are to be secured by Section 106. The viability of the scheme has meant that 14% rather than 32% affordable housing is proposed. This equates to 30 dwellings. However, there is a review mechanism to be included in Section 106, so this could mean a figure lower or higher than the 30 dwellings. An update to committee is that we've received 5 further objections regarding infrastructure, highways impact, flood risk and impact to existing properties, and a neutral comment regarding the limit to the expansion of Bottesford, which have been received from residents following the notification of the application to planning committee. These raise no new issues that aren't already covered in the report. The Parish Council have also sent in a further letter of objection. The matters raised in their objection relate to flood risk and sequential testing, traffic and pedestrian access and housing density, which again are already addressed in the report. Can I have the next slide, please? I've highlighted here 3 footpaths which LCC Highways have requested improvements to, and also it includes the footbridge. These improvements are to be secured and detailed in the Section 106. And also today we have recently received a consultation response from National Highways who've raised no objections to the proposal. Can I have the next slide, please? Just a couple of photos there of where the access would be. Next slide, please. The bridge to be replaced, and then just another pedestrian footbridge. Next slide, please. And then there's just a few photos of the field. You can see the church spire in the first photo. And next slide, please. So in summary, the proposal is on allocated site Bot 3 of the Melton Local Plan and the Bottesford Neighbourhood Plan. The unallocated land accords with the residential development criteria of Policy 1 of the Bottesford Neighbourhood Plan, as it is located within the village envelope. The likely impact of the development on the existing highway network in terms of additional vehicle trip generation is considered to be acceptable, and an appropriate vehicle access is proposed. The flood risk assessment is considered acceptable and meets the requirements of the MPPF. The areas proposed for development are within flood zone 1, and an 8-metre easement from the River Devon is to be maintained. Matters of ecology, archaeology, noise and drainage are considered acceptable. There are no objections from statutory consultees. There is a low level of less than substantial harm to the significance of the conservation area, the Church of St Mary and part of the Ridge and Furrow, and therefore there is some conflict with policy EN11 of the Melton Local Plan and policy 12 of the Bottesford Neighbourhood Plan. However, it is considered that the benefits of the scheme by delivering housing that contributes to the 5-year housing land supply and supports the government's objective of significantly boosting the supply of homes, along with the social, economic and environmental benefits, would outweigh the impacts in accordance with the provisions of the MPPF. It's therefore recommended that the application is approved and delegated back to officers for the completion of the Section 106. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Do any councillors want to ask any questions, clarification? Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few. Could you put the photo up of the access, and it's with the gardens, with the fencing, please? That's yeah. The next one over, please. Thank you. That's the one. Thank you, officers. So one of the questions, if you don't have the answers now, that's fine. I can wait for later. But you see where the fences are there. You see when I walked down, you saw some that were sticking out and some that were more recessed. Is the ownership of that part of the residents who've fenced it off, or is this in the site? That's question one. I've got a couple more, but if the answer's forthcoming, I can pause on those other two.
So as far as I'm aware, it's all included in the red line. So I believe, I mean, the agent might be able to clarify this better for me, but I believe there was an agreement with the railway land that they could utilise some of their land, but it is the railway land, so the applicant's ownership. So anything that's in the red line, if it may include some of their gardens, it's because of an agreement that they had to utilise the land. Thanks.
Yeah, and then the other question to officers. So we mentioned affordable housing, and that's going to be severely reduced to 30 of a 215 house application. And then obviously the housing mix. Are we to set that out now at this outline stage? Because we've been here many times. We come all the way to the end and we lose all the affordable housing because the landowner comes or the agent comes and says, oh, I've probably paid too much for it and I can't afford to build affordable housing. And lo and behold, we get loads of housing at £1 million each. And that really hasn't made it sustainable. So I just want to clarify, are we trying to determine that right now or are we not? And if we are not trying to do that, is there any comments that maybe the committee may say, would that help officers in the future? Because I think 30 affordable housing is very narrow on making it a sustainable for, we've got a housing crisis, people need houses. So I think that's an issue. But anyway, over to you guys.
So currently we're just looking at the outline with access at the moment. So housing mix will be for later for reserve matters. Yeah, it's all part of the actual reserve matters. So the reserve matters will indicate which are the affordable housing as part of the layout.
Okay. Sorry, Chair. Thank you so much for putting my speaker back on. So would it assist officers if we bring this into a debate? So at this point, or
yeah, if it's not for clarification, yeah, we'll move it to later.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a bit of confusion. Are we talking about housing mix in terms of the tenure mix of the affordable housing or the general affordable housing of the site? Because they're two distinct things.
Well, there's tenure and then obviously housing mix for 215, because if you could build 215 5-bed houses kind of thing. But yeah, I think you get the point, Tom. So thank you.
So yeah, so the housing mix is what Rachel said. That will come back at a later stage. The tenure mix will be effectively agreed by the Section 106 agreement, but the 106 agreement will require an affordable housing specification, and it will detail all the different types of tenure. That will then come forward after the Section 106 agreement and will be agreed with the affordable housing officer. So the agreement basically sets out all the different things you can do, and it'll have requirements of what the specification needs to do, including exactly what plots that they will be. So it comes forward in stages, but the tenure mix will come forward effectively after the 106.
Councillor Pritchett.
2 points on this, on affordable housing. Is there not a rolling viability review in this one? So the numbers of affordable houses can go up and can go down over the lifetime of the scheme. Can you answer that one, please?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did include that there would be a review mechanism within the 106, so there is potential for movement on the number.
You know, it was in the Melton Times 30 affordable houses, and I think we need to be clear that it's not fixed now at 30. It can go up or down with the review. In relation to, again, affordable housing, prior to any debate section, page 68, there's some inappropriate comments in from the housing officer. The housing officer's consultation, it was not on the portal, and it says there's a good amount of social housing. Well, that's a personal judgmental comment The target's 32%. We've got waiting lists, issues with viability.
Sorry, what point are you trying to?
I'm trying to make a
clarify?
point that it's caused problems before where an officer has said there's a good amount of housing in an application, and we've got page 204. It's an incorrect comment. It shouldn't have been in at all.
Okay, point made. Thank you very much. Yeah, and Councillor Brown.
It's coming back on to, so this is going to be delegated, just so I'm absolutely clear, this, if we approve this tonight, the reserve matters be completely delegated to the officers then, or is that going to come back to committee? That's my first question. I've got a second question.
So the application is in outline. Should a reserve matters application come forward following that, it will go through its usual process. Should it reach the trigger or be called in, it will come to committee, but this is just the outline only at the moment.
Oh, yeah, okay, because I think what Councillor Higgins is getting at is the safeguards around affordable housing. And just to clarify is that the point that Councillor Pritchard raises about the subjective view of the being enough affordable housing, that's contradicted in my view in 7.1.10, where basically LCC, Allison Communities, this area of Melton Mowbray is purely served in terms of supported living. And we all know supported living is affordable social rented housing in most cases, or exempt housing if the private sector comes in to deliver it. For vulnerable working adults with mental health or learning disabilities, a site of this scale could offer an opportunity of supported living development of up to 12 self-contained flats. I just think we need to be consistent, because at one stage you're saying there's a lack of a type of affordable housing, and at another point you're saying there is too much of it.
So Pritchard, again, for clarification.
Clarification, yeah, page 243, para 243, page 73 of the Bottesford Neighbourhood Plan. It comments that the 7.5, I don't know whether this is correct, 7.5% socially rented in Bottesford compared to 11% across the.
Is this clarifying the presentation?
It's clarifying the point about the comment.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarification?
I've got one. The section 106.
Put your hand up, please, Nas.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Section 106 in the report, it doesn't give the uncosted items, and I think Sarah will know there's a significant issue with the footbridge at Riverside Walk that's not listed. Can you give some assurance that it will be agreed in a section 106 with the developer?
Yes, so it is to be included. Not all items are costed, but can be clauses in the 106. So yes, it is to be included, the improvement. So the footpaths that I showed on the slide includes that footbridge. So there are improvements. Those will be detailed by highways, and they will be included in the 106.
I raise the point because it's going to be a significant bridge and a major route into the village, and it's mentioned in the applicant's papers and in the local plan policy. It requires good connections with the village. Thank you.
Any other questions for clarification before we move on? Thank you very much. In that case, then, I'd like to call Councillor Bob Bayman from the Bottesford Parish Council. Welcome, Bob. Welcome back. Thank you. You know how to use the microphone, I know. You have 3 minutes, as you know. Tom will give you the 30-second warning. If you can actually
just wait for my
well, yeah, we'll start when you start talking. So that's when you're happy with the presentation is there. You happy?
Great, thank you.
Okay, we'll start.
Thank you very much. Yes, Bottesford Parish Council objects to this development. This is not the development that is originally in the neighbourhood plan. It's changed enormously. This is in main because the consortium that was due to put this together in the first instance fell apart. So corners have been cut every way. We've just heard of the number of affordables being cut, but also the density of the housing has gone up enormously. The whole sense of the development of placemaking in the site. And in fact, we now hear that some of the things that were meant to be paid for in the actual project are now being put over to 106, like the bridges that were always part of the original plan. So it's no longer the plan that was originally in the neighbourhood plan, and that's disappointing. In addition, despite all the assurances, the sequential testing has not happened. And we all know that sequential testing in this highly vulnerable parish is absolutely essential. So it's written in the local plan, it's written in the Bottesford neighbourhood plan, and it's in national policy framework that this site shouldn't be developed unless there's a sequential plan put in place. This is what the neighbourhood plan says, that this site, Bot 3, that the flood risk sequential test would be required for this site. This has not been done, so therefore it should fall on that technicality. Melton Borough Council's own local plan says that, again, the Borough Council will follow a sequential approach to flood risk management with the aim of locating development on the land with the lowest risk. This has not been done in this case, and it needs to have been done, and again, so therefore should fall. We talk also about the need for surface water testing. There may not be an issue there about water flooding. There is. We know that, and we know the mapping of this area is poor. EA have said it themselves. Everybody that has been associated with the project said that the mapping, water flood mapping of the area is poor. We know that surface water there is an issue. It has been on a number of occasions since the vast floods of 2001. This is instance back in 2020. This is the site that this is being built upon. This is what it looked like only 4 years ago. This is no fit state to be building lots and lots of houses. So we know that flooding is an issue. The second is traffic management. And again, despite assurances, 3 junctions have not been fixed. And it is okay for LCC Highways to say that these junctions are okay and they can take the traffic. We know they cannot. We have to cycle around these junctions, drive around these junctions. These 3 junctions are not ready to take this vast number of new houses. And then finally, it's the housing density. Housing density is an issue because simply the consortium fell apart. The density that we should be having there is between 10 and 25 dph. That would mean 127 dwellings, and we're now looking at an application for 215. I would put to you that for these reasons, this is not acceptable and that you should throw it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you for the presentation. Well done. That would be a class on how to make a presentation in your 3 minutes. Do any members have any questions for clarification? And I do stress clarification. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Bob. You mentioned traffic, and when I've visited Bottesford, and this might appear in the debate, so it's a question to you. Has the Parish Council done any surveys on the traffic? So what I observed when I went to the site, and I may talk about that a bit later. So I get your comment, and I think your comment is valid. But is there any technical data that you have or anything where there's some traffic surveys to hang, if I was going to go on that and hang my hat on, so to speak? Thank you.
Yes, we haven't commissioned our own, but Melton Borough Council, I think it was Edwards and Edwards, is that the right team, actually did an analysis of this about 2.5 years ago. And if you go back to their report, they will show how dangerous those 3 junctions are. That was a Melton Borough Council analysis and that was presented back to Bottesford Parish Council.
Just raise that, and it says there's some work by MBC. Can we clarify that point that the Parish Council has just raised? If there is this report, Edwards and Edwards or something? Yeah, because I haven't seen that. So if that report is there, that would be useful. Thank you very much.
Let's pass that. You happy, or should we move on and come back to that? Please. Yeah. Are there any other questions for clarification? And we'll come back to that question. Councillor Elnett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bob. My question of clarification is this. I think I heard you say that everybody thinks that the flood mapping is not up to spec, shall we say, in my words. Now, can you just amplify what you mean by everybody? Because I didn't quite hear who the everybody is. Okay, thank you.
So when we started the neighbourhood plan, we met with the EA, and EA had said to us that the mapping that was done over the parish was done through a computer-generated model, and that it needed updating. It was poor, and they haven't yet updated it. That process started 2016. So we're now 8 years later and it still hasn't been updated. The applicant themselves had a consultant who looked at the flooding issue, and the consultant that the applicant brought forward said that that mapping was inadequate and shouldn't be used. So that bears up to our own knowledge of the site, of the area and that particular site, that the mapping doesn't actually, as it looks, as it was shown earlier today, doesn't actually reflect the reality.
Thank you. You okay with that? And Councillor Pritchett.
Good evening, Bob. You mentioned sequential testing in the neighbourhood plan. Can you give me a reference, please, in the neighbourhood plan? I couldn't find it.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, I can't give you the reference, but I could point it to.
I think Tom has an answer for that if you wish.
Thank you.
Paragraph 332. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll just ask one. Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Oh, yeah, just a quick one. In the 4 pictures you showed of fields that were had water in it, I'm just looking for when I looked through the presentation before the meeting. The second picture you said, which actually showed more water, I think was in the adjacent field and not in the field that's being built on in this application. Is that true?
Those photographs in the second lot, the Storm Dennis 220, were of both fields. So that is the field that's being the current field and the field that is planned next. So it was part of the original consortium. So yeah, those images are of the 2 fields.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, got 2 questions for you, Bob. The first question is in relation to the overall. There was, I think it was March of last year, there was a consultation exercise taken between the parish council, maybe ward councillors, and the planning officers. How involved was that, and what points did you put across them to try and help design out some of these issues that you're raising?
I think it's fair to say that this issue now has been going on for 8 years, and the applicant, through their agent Planet X, was very close to us for a number of years when they were developing the whole site, and we were working in consultation very carefully with them and developing a number of things, and that's how it ended up in the neighbourhood plan. The change is that because of the consortium falling apart, there's very clear that they've had to consolidate the density of the housing, make lots of other changes. We've been involved at every stage of the way with the developers, with the agency, with the agents, and with Melton Borough Council planning officers themselves. Have never missed a meeting. Bottesford Parish Council have taken every opportunity to make these points throughout the process. It's a shame that we're in the situation right now where we feel again, for the first time ever, almost quite distant.
Sorry, can we just
from
speak
it?
to answering
But
the
yeah,
question, please?
well,
Yeah.
the answer is we've been very close throughout the whole process.
Councillor Brown, did you have another question? Yeah.
One more. Just going back onto looking at the legalities and the technical issues, is that, just to be absolutely clear, your local plan was adopted in 2021, and your neighbourhood plan and the local plan for Melton is obviously prior to that.
Yeah.
And obviously it's an allocated site within the neighbourhood plan. I'm just thinking, obviously that causes various issues. How do you see as a council those issues would legally be overcome from your point of view around the fact that it is an allocated site? So i.e., there is an issue of timing and an issue of legalities around.
It's definitely an allocated site, and that's not the contention. The contention is that the planning application is now quite different than the allocation. So we understand it's an allocated site, but it needs a planning application that's similar to the one that was put forward in the neighbourhood plan.
Any other questions for clarification? No? In that case, thank you very much, Bob. Thanks for your time. In that case, I'd next like to call Bob Sparham, who's the Bottesford Forum Residents Group. Thank you very much for coming along this evening, Mr. Sparham. I think, you also have a presentation. Yeah. If you press the red, the face in the middle, the red light should come on just underneath the buttons.
Oh.
That's it. That's the one.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Are you ready with your presentation? We'll start when you start talking about that presentation. So please make sure you're happy.
Okay. Firstly, my name is Bob Sparham. I'm the chair of a residents group, Bottesford Forum. Slide 2 is the actual paragraph from a local plan, and it's you want the actual reference. It is on the top of that slide. The really important line is the flooding sequential test would need to be applied to this site, and the last line that's really important is that the applications will be accompanied by a national planning policy framework compliant risk assessment. This paragraph is the reason why the Bottesford Forum campaigned in support of the neighbourhood plan in the 2021 referendum. Okay, this is the developer's flood risk assessment. You can see the really important line is that a sequential and exception test is not required. In complete contrast to the neighbourhood plan. The excuse is the rule says they don't have to, as the site is in flood zone 1. This is the breach of the neighbourhood plan, the NPPF and the NBC flooding policy EN11A. The NBC policy says development should be located in zone 1 outside of flood water risk. Just how outside of floodwater risk is Bot 3. The FRA says it's in an area between 20 to 50% risk. The LLFA say the site has some areas at low risk of surface pattern. Are these two sentences compatible? Can Bot 3 really be described as low risk? The photographic evidence we've seen shows that it can't. The LAFA say that surface water risk will be managed. The sequential test, that's a breach of NPPF guidelines. They say that the sequential test is for the local planning authority to determine, which is correct. And then they say that the council have historically taken a sequential approach to this site, which is factually wrong. The second line of the reversed MPPP says, even when a flood risk assessment shows the development can be made safe through its lifetime without increasing the risk elsewhere, the sequential test still needs to be satisfied. So even if the developers, the FRA and the LAFA are proving right, which they haven't been, Bot 3 still needs a sequential test.
Thank you very much. That's your 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for clarification from the Speaker, Councillor Olnett?
Thank you, Bob. Can I just ask a broader question? If the sequential testing had been done, would you still have an objection to this development?
No, we supported the application on the proviso that the sequential test was done because we were so concerned with the risk of surface water flooding. But if it had been done, it would have been a reassurance for us to take it forward.
Any other questions for clarification? No. In that case, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Spearman. I'd next like to call David Pendle from Marrons, the agent for the site. Thank you very much for your time. You press the little face in the middle. As with all people, you have 3 minutes. Tom will give you a 30-second warning. And if you can start closing that point, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. And good evening, councillors. My name's David Pendle. I am a partner at Marrons, part of the Shakespeare Martineau Law Group, and here to speak on behalf of Rectory Land Company, the applicant. Particularly delighted to be back here at Parkside as you consider this application to deliver local plan allocation Bot 3. You've had a very comprehensive presentation from Mrs. Gordon. I won't repeat the points she's made, and you've already started to hear discussions around some of the points that will be of interest to you, particularly around highways and flooding. It has to be said, this has been a very complex application to progress. It's been in with you for a number of years. We've been put through our paces, quite rightly, and we've taken time to understand the infrastructure that's required to make this site work. And you may or may not see within the detail in front of you that we've got a £4.5 million bill for the embankment and the new bridge and to divert high voltage power lines. The reality of that work meant that we needed to do viability testing, which we've done. We wanted to be able to meet the full request of Section 106 contributions, which stand at £1.36 million. The way to do that was a 14% contribution towards affordable housing. And you've already, again, started to discuss what that might mean and things like review triggers in the 106, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in due course. You have heard concerns about flooding. We take that seriously, as you hope we would do, and we have sympathy with that. We have an FRA which is appropriately modelled flood risk, and there's been conversations about what the EA maps do. An FRA effectively updates those through its own modelling. You've also asked us to have conditions on the permission which will require infiltration testing as we go forwards to make sure that the mitigation strategy works. That's quite appropriate, and we're happy with that. You've heard about the sequential approach to the development of the proposals. There are a number of components to that as you work your way through the MPPF, and I'm not going to lecture you on that or try and school you, but you've adopted the site or allocated the site within the local plan. Planning inspectorate will have undertaken an assessment of whether or not that was appropriate having regard to flood risk. The pragmatic approach that PINs take on sequential testing is to avoid flood zones 2 and 3 as you develop a design the actual layout for a site, and we've done that, and you can see that we've got no built development within flood zone 1 at all. The drainage strategy means the site will hold more water and drain more slowly than it does with development than it does at the moment as a greenfield site. The access has been designed and accepted as safe and suitable for vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists. We've got no objections from either the highways authorities or the flood risk agencies. We've got no other objections on technical matters from any statutory consultees. We'd very much welcome your approval tonight so that we can make our way to the reserve matters, which, as you've heard from officers already tonight, will come back in front of you.
Thank you very much.
Consider.
Thank you very much. And then questions for clarification. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, I've got potentially 2 or 3. Do you know how many acres your site is at all?
Yeah, I can probably do it a little easier in hectares, and these aren't specific. It's about 11 hectares, and we've got development on around 5.5, 6 hectares.
To clarify with that, is the, because obviously viability, you mentioned viability, and some of that obviously is the land value itself. Has the agreement, has the land been purchased, or is the agreement still subject to planning or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, well, you've got the viability appraisal that we've gone through has to take into account land value. The land is within the holding of Rectory Farm Company. There was talk earlier about the consortium falling apart, and you saw pictures of the flooding on the particular fields that are now no longer within that 6 hectares that I just talked about. There are components of land that still need to be brought in the commercial deals to do that. So across the 11 hectare site, you've heard reference to railway company land in particular that is owned by Rectory Farm but has license over it. And again, on the footpath land that is within Rectory Farm, but there are individuals with licenses to put their front gardens across those and so on. So the land that's required to deliver the scheme is available. That's understood within the viability appraisal. And what the viability appraisal did was sort to understand what would happen if you plugged those big pieces of kit in to try and get development away. And part of the reason for the flip of the boroughs land was the flooding and the fact you had to cross the Devon into the boroughs land, that land that you particularly saw that did flood. Bridge is expensive to get into there. It flooded anyway. We're supposed to pragmatically avoid it, taking a sequential approach, which we've done. And therefore, you see the stock of dwellings sitting within that central part of the site. We did then bring an additional area of land in around Devon Farm, and that was to compensate for the loss of other land. So what you actually then what that results in is up to 215 homes at around low to mid 30s dwellings per hectare, which is obviously the effective use of land according to national standards.
Thank you. Any Councillor Mason?
Yes, what I'm about to ask is a terribly unfair question. I do apologise. Have you any idea on what basis speed assessment tests were carried out in and around the site?
Not the detail on that, no, but there has been
guidance.
There has been a road safety audit.
Yeah,
and the road safety audit will have taken.
What guidance would you? Do you know what guidance it?
I couldn't tell you what the name of the guidance is. No, I'm not a highways engineer.
Oh, that's fair.
But it was clearly it's been assessed by the local highways authority and signed off as being appropriate and accurate.
Is this a question for the? Are you okay with that? Yes, sir. Councillor Olnett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I want to return to the flooding issue specifically. Now, I thought I heard you. I have to say, I have to keep saying I thought I heard you because I'm a bit Mutt and Jeff. All right. So, I think I heard you say that the FRA was the equivalent of of revising the baseline for the sequential testing. I think that's what I heard you say. Is that right?
No, not
Right.
specifically. No, I was talking about the age of the EA flood maps and what you do, the process you go through when you undertake an FRA and how you assess flood risk. So there is a plan. I'm not got it in front of me now, but if you looked in the design and access statement, there's a plan that shows the extent of the floodplain, the flood zone 3 according to the Environment Agency, and then the extent of the same floodplain according to our FRA, which is a site-specific document. And you'll see they're broadly the same, but there are slight differences. And I was talking specifically about that. My comments on the sequential test were separate to that.
Thank you. If I can continue on that plane. One of the problems I have in trying to assess all these sort of applications where there's a flooding risk, and we get lots of these, is that the data is quite elderly. I think the baseline for this, if I've understood advice from officers in briefings, is sort of 2015 to 17. And we are, as we all know, experiencing great volatility in weather patterns and increasing rainfalls. And I'm very suspicious about how confident we are. I accept goodwill and good faith and all the rest of that. I'm not, impugning anyone's integrity, but I'm very concerned about how confident you and I and everyone can be about what you're saying with respect to sequential testing. And we've got a flavour of it in presentations from other people. So, and you've heard other objectors say specifically they feel sequential testing was not done. So I need to hear again from you why you would rebut that and what the quality of that is. Could you do that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a couple of points in there. I think the first one is about the efficacy, for want of a better phrase, of the flood risk work that's been undertaken. I mean, it sort of sounds like a grand statement now. We live in an age where technical work is generally debunked by all of us, isn't it? We don't really trust technical work. The flood risk assessment goes through a process of it starts with topography, it starts with historic flood risk data, it looks at the Environment Agency mapping, and then it looks to test and model what will happen if you plug development in on an area and what the flood risk will really look like. So that FRA that you've got in front of you is being assessed by the flood risk engineers at the local flood authority and accepted as being accurate. Now, we sit here asking for outline planning permission, and we've got a detailed layout to go away, and presuming you approve this tonight and give us the conditions that we've got in front of us on the report, we've got a job to go away and design it appropriately. One of the things you've asked us to do as part of that is to come back with a drainage strategy that meets the FRA that we've said we think is correct, do infiltration testing to make sure that we can drain the site in the way that we've said we think we can drain it, and you will then assess that again. So I suppose that's probably a careful way of me saying we think the FRA's right. We think we understand the extent of flood risk well enough to move on to the next stage, and you have an opportunity to go through that with us again in the future. And as in association with the flood risk authority, and make a judgment about whether or not it's right or wrong at that stage. So that's the first point on flood risk modelling. You then asked me about the sequential test. You have, Borough Council have adopted a local plan that's been through statutory process, assessed a myriad of sites. I don't know how many, but it will inevitably have been several hundred. And there will have been a number of factors that you will have tested, and one of them will have been flood risk. That's been considered by the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has taken a judgment about whether or not this site is capable of coming forwards, having regard to the known level of flood risk, and judged that you were right to allocate it. The safeguards then are that you should think about the sequential approach to development within the site. And I use the phrase sequential approach specifically because that's different to sequential testing. So a sequential approach is to avoid those areas at highest risk of flooding when you are designing the way the site works. So when I talk about the land to the west, next to the former railway line coming out, across the Devon and in between the Devon and the railway line coming out of the scheme, one of the reasons for that is because it flooded. It was at higher risk of flooding. So our sequential approach was to remove it. What we do then within the body of the remaining body of the site is work out where the flood risk is, lay that down as a constraint on a plan, and we avoid it. So in accordance with the MPPF, and one of the speakers talked about what the MPPF said, it said avoid areas at risk of flooding. That's what we've done through that sequential approach of developing the design. So we're comfortable, and your officers are comfortable, that we've undertaken that appropriately.
So there's two halves to your answer. The second half I'll take up during debate with officers, if I may. The first half, I think what you're saying is that you think the FRA approach and all the bits that you added to it is okay, but you anticipate that when you come back to reserve matter applications, it may not be okay because that has to be tested again, and therefore it puts a sort of a stop on your proposals. Is that how you see it?
I wouldn't word it that way, Councillor, but it is
I'm sure you would.
It is a safeguard, isn't it? It's a fact that if you ask us to do infiltration testing and we do that and it shows that the drainage scheme doesn't work, then we have to think again and you don't give permission. You would stop at that point, wouldn't you? Yeah. But I would stress we're confident in our technical work, and so is the statutory consultee.
Okay. Can I just say, Chair, I'm not impugning in any way that the quality of technical work. It's just that we've got to test how good the outcome is.
Okay, so
no matter how good the input is.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, David. My points tonight are seemingly relatively minor in the scheme of an £80 million enterprise, but very important in relation to the operation of it. I will be speaking during the debate section about active travel and the walking and cycling. During an early stage of this, during 2020, the highways people got involved in this with some Section 106 requests and agreement early on, right? That have not come through any local management. And just to get to the point about it is, would you have any objection cost-wise if members were to agree in removing the cycleway to Devon Lane and putting it into the Riverside Walk Bridge? Because the Riverside Walk Bridge will be the main artery into the village. The highways officer wrongly assumed, he said, I assume this is the main entrance, with a desk check in 2020. Now, from my look at it, it doesn't seem, instead of doing it so many meters this way, it goes the other way. Do you see a particular issue at this time in that?
Personally, I don't. And when I sit here and do land promotion, we're used to having those kinds of conversations. If that's part of the recommendation that you make, delegated authority for officers to explore the Section 106 package, and you've already heard there's a review mechanism, we're happy to have that conversation through that process. Absolutely. Clearly, I can't sit here and guarantee it because it needs to be still compliant, and it would need to have potentially approval of the local harbours authority.
Would be, it's all over the neighbourhood plan. There's no problem with that in the local plan. The final question is, the county council highways have been asking for bus stop improvements, right? But they've never asked for a bus stop on the site. Why should people in 215 houses have to walk to the bus stop? Do you have any problem with putting a bus stop in?
Again, I don't, but it's within the walking distances for bus stops, and that's why they've not asked us to do it, and they've asked us to pay for the bus stops and the drop curbs outside.
I think that we've got like we've got a settlement coming here that is 17 bigger.
Not sure we can actually do anything about it.
So
bus stops.
I think we can put it to the county council on that one. I'll cover it during debate.
Councillor Gordon.
Yes. From what I can read, I just really want to clarify this, from what I've read in the report as well, that the 215 houses are not set in stone. So it's up to 215 houses. So this can change as time goes on. Thank you.
Yeah, you nodded affirmative to that. Councillor Brown?
Is there a risk, David, on the viability when you go into reserve matters of it coming back looking for more than 215 houses, because there is other land to the other side which you could acquire?
Not on this permission, we couldn't know, because it's up to 215, so we can't pierce that. So it'd be a case of going away and starting again, as simple as that.
No further questions. I'll just ask one there. I just wanted to clarify something that you said, which was the amount of money you put aside for the road and for the bridge was 4.5 million.
Yeah.
And 1.36 million towards affordable homes.
It's 1.36 million is the total Section 106 package,
Right.
with 14% affordable housing.
And that's in the viability that you're happy with.
Correct. Yeah. And I just wanted to make perhaps opportune for me, rather than taking time or unnecessarily. You talked about the housing mix earlier. The housing mix isn't set by this application, but the viability is based upon a housing mix which is policy compliant. That's the Hedner mix that you require. So that's gone into the viability appraisal. So the costs are correct. It's not based upon, for argument's sake, £1 million homes. But also that would then dictate what would happen next with the layout, and the layout is based upon 215 homes that are Hedner compliant, the right mix. In other words, it's the right amount of space on the site to fit in or around that number.
Thank you. Any other members have any other questions? In that case, thank you very much, and thanks very much for your time this evening. Thank you. I'll move this into debate. Yeah, I was going to say there's one point I'd like to come back to the officers on, which is about the comments that have been made about sequential tests. Is there any other points you want to actually mention as we go through?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't think, to be honest, I could add any more to what Mr. Pendle said in respect to the sequential test. That's basically exactly what I was going to say in terms of the approach to that through the local plan. There was a question, I think it came from Councillor Higgins, about the Bottesford Highway study. So yes, there was a study done. It was undertaken by Melton Borough Council, and it was Edwards and Edwards who did that, and it was around about 2 to 3 years ago. That study made some suggestions as to how a different approach could be undertaken to the access to this site, and it has been fully reviewed by the Highway Authority, and they are satisfied with the proposals as they have come forward. There was another query. So it was the sequential test. No, I think that was it. Unless anybody else has mentioned any other ones, they're the points I've got written down.
Clarification on that, Sarah. I think the work from Edwards and Edwards suggested that these were reviewed. You know, there was no review, there was no alternative schemes put forward. I think that Edwards and Edwards, I think, suggested that there was further work could be done. You know, there wasn't further work done and rejected. That's the difference I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Highway Authority were involved in the production of that particular study, and they have reviewed the details from that study, and they've made no further suggestions as to any alterations that need to be made to this particular scheme, and they're content with the details that have been submitted by the applicant.
Thing is, just that, yes, they may have looked at it, but nobody's picked this up and come forward with an alternative scheme. They've said they didn't need an alternative scheme. There's a slight difference.
That's correct. Yeah, there's no requirement to do an alternative scheme, and the Highway Authority have assessed it and they're content.
Okay, I'd like to open this application for debate. Who would like to discuss it? Councillor Higgins, thank you.
Only because we were just talking about the traffic, and so when I was driving there, and you come out the site and you're turning right, you're immediately faced with a junction. And what I worry about with 250 homes trying to turn, not all of the cars are trying to turn right, that's gonna cause some difficulty. And while I accept the highways may think that is satisfactory, as a road user, I think that's bonkers. But that's just my own opinion. And as I said to Councillor Bayman, I need something to hang my hat on.
Can I just have one
Yeah,
point? It was just I did mean to actually ask the applicant, but it was from a comment you made earlier about the picture of the access. The actual road access would be in Little Jack's car park, or what is currently Little Jack's car park, not that pathway at the junction. It's about 25 yards further down the road. So okay. then that cuts across to the path.
Okay.
So I meant to clarify that earlier. So apologies.
No, thank you for that, Jake. Well, that I mean, but equally, anyone is coming out of that junction is probably just going to have impact of cars coming out of the site anyway. So I think that's going to create some congestion. But thanks for the clarity, because I still think. I don't think it's as bonkers, let me put it that after you've clarified. But I still think as a road user, as a car user, I think we're just and might be satisfactory. And I probably, if I then voted to refuse to go against the Highway Authority, if it went to an appeal, and I know how all that ends, because an appeal inspector would say, well, Councillor Higgins, what technical data have you got to refute that? And I haven't got any, apart from this Edwards and Edwards, which I think Sarah's discussed it with Councillor Pritchett. That all said, I'll just get this down now. And I thought the agent was very good at answering the questions. Affordable housing, I'm deeply disappointed why it's coming down to 14%. And I think if it gets any lower, then you start to say, well, why would we use this site if it's not going to deliver the affordable housing that's very much needed for society? There's many young people who need to get on the housing ladder. And that's why we're having to build more and more houses, because many young people can't get on the housing ladder, so which just will mean more and more houses. So that's a risk I think the applicant's taken, and I did thought the agent was really he explained to me very well, and while I don't know all the information that's gone on there, what I can understand is a lot of investment has gone in, lots of studies have gone in to come up with this scheme, and that's probably why they've struggled to get it where it is. And so I do have some sympathy with the applicant there, and there's a lot of headwinds to get this site out of the ground, even if we allow this. But I am concerned that if it ever comes back and there's can't be the affordable housing of at least 14, and I think 14 is still very poor, and for the same reasons Councillor Brown raised what LCC was saying for supported housing, I just then start thinking, is this really a viable site that I'd want? And it probably is running at the risk of me saying no if it was right at the start and before it was an allocated site. That all said, we're just looking at the access, and I think the officers have answered those questions I raised at clarification. So I'll listen further to the debate, but I think I've made my points known. Thank you.
Sarah, just before I move on to the next here, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I did come back to the final thing that I'd noted down that had escaped me. As part of the questions earlier, there was a query in respect of housing mix. So in terms of the market housing mix, you can at this stage condition that, and you'd condition it in something along the lines of the development shall provide for an appropriate mix of dwellings to meet the current and future needs of the borough, potentially in accordance with policy 10 of the neighbourhood plan. And that is perfectly within your rights to do so on an outline consent.
I'd be satisfied if a member will put that in. So I'd be happy with that. Thank you, Sarah.
Councillor Brown, did you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just a few points. Just put in the context is that, from my point of view, is it's an allocated site. Yeah. I'm not happy with the affordables, but we never are at the moment, and that's probably going to get worse because the cost of material, building levels, and the cost of staffing, etc. And I'm sure there'll be another viability on that. However, it is what it is. There's just a couple of things that concern me. I'm a little bit not too sure about how the county councils come to the different, not just the junctions that Councillor Higgins brings up, but also the different speed levels. There seems to be different speeds in close proximity, especially out on the area of Bowbridge Lane as you're heading out that way, etc. The second bit is the connectivity overall to the village, not just driving, but also footpaths and bridges, etc. And then secondly, the 106, there's a lot of unsurety. We're not sure exactly what will be achieved and what will be able to be achieved to deliver everything that connects the village, accepting that if all of those things can be overcome, the development will or should go ahead because, as the agent said, it meets all the requirements in the local plan, neighbourhood plan, and PPF, etc., etc. However, they are the couple of issues that I've got there, and I welcome the condition on the social housing. But the reason I say those two things is that we have example after example around footpaths to go and across the borough that don't go somewhere and then don't lead anywhere for half a mile, etc. We have footpaths that don't get finished. We have developers that come in with great ideas and then say they can't afford to do things. And I think, as the parish council said earlier, their expectations were slightly different than what has come to fruition in the end. Although, bearing in mind, we have to accept that things move on and times change, etc. So not against it, but I want to hear what everybody else has said. And there might be more learned people around the room that would be able to fill me in on that, because when I walked around the site, there was a number of footpaths and stuff very close to houses, etc. You could open a window. There's been saying that some of the land's privately owned, so how are we going to overcome all that? I'm sure there's answers for it all, etc. But if they're overcome, I think you have to accept it. But at the moment, I'm going to just listen to the debate, and then we'll see where we get to.
Councillor Atherton, I can't remember which one it was, but
So thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that the area that we've talked about as Bot 3 is the area shown on page 29 of the report in its entirety, not just the bit that the current development is planned for?
my understanding, the whole Bot 3 is both fields, but the application is for the one part.
So in that case, then, Bot 3 was adopted into the Bottesford local plan based on an assumed number of houses being 163. Now, that was an assumption, and I understand it was not a maximum, but the number of affordable houses based on that 163 would have been around about 52. At 32%. The current plan put before us is not using all that space, yet increases the number of houses to 215. So at 32%, that would have given us some 68 affordable houses. The viability assessment, though, seems to have reduced that down to 14% of the 215, giving us only 30 affordable houses. Every planning session we have that talks about development of estates, parcels of land that fall under the requirement to provide affordable housing, either gets it taken out or has the numbers reduced to so few that we end up with the square root of nothing, a part of a house. I'm not happy again, and I don't know what we can do about it, but I'm not happy that we've gone down from potentially 52 houses to 30. And let's ignore the fact that it went up to 68 at one stage, but we've got fewer affordable houses in this plan now than was originally agreed when this parcel of land was accepted into the Melton plan and into the Bottesford local plan and is known as Bot 3.
And I may agree with many of your statements, but as you and many others, the viability is a word I'll take to my grave as a word that I hate, and is a constant bane of this committee. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm majoring on the active travel, which is important. All through the local plan and neighbourhood plan, it's about this site's connection into Bottesford. It's a new community, but with connections. And the process of the way that it's gone about it has been in reverse. We've had a very good applicant travel plan, which sets out the ideals. The LCC have then sent section 106 for bus stops and upgrades, and one where there's, well, it's an unsafe, a trade. They've offered a trade for one. There's been no local on the ground assessment of design lines. And then at the end of it all, it's a living document. They will want £6,000 to monitoring it, and the applicant has to employ a travel coordinator. Then right at the end of it, there's a condition, 10.24, that we approve the travel plan. So instead of so I'm going to give you some of the consequences of this. They can trade a bus stop on site. It's already there, and I'm asking for three things for members and officers to support me on. Is a bus stop on site, which we can amend the section 106. It's in the documents they offer. Same one. Now, Devon Lane. The Devon Lane is not on your photographs that you put in. The Devon Lane exit for a byway is right next to a blind drive for a house next to the chapel, and it was assumed at a desk that it was going to be the main entrance into the village. It's not. The floods go up to the top of the road, and the aims for the site, it's not the desired route that people will go. They will go to another place to get into the village. And it's creating a possibility of a ring road for cyclists to come out onto the dangerous road there, one single lane with no footpath, right? So I'm asking for to be made a footpath, but not. And there's been no safety assessment at all in the papers. I've trawled through it. There's no safety assessment for cyclists coming out, horses, displays, etc., etc. And what I'm asking is for the bridge at Riverside Walk, that a cycleway that is from their own road goes there to that, so the kids and everybody else can go over the new bridge and cycle to school, the doctor's surgery. It's very straightforward. So I'm asking for members' support on that and the officers in doing, and I can put it into writing. We've not been engaged, and it wasn't part of the workshop in March 23. And I've on record that I wrote to the planning officer in November 2023, advising that we get control of this following a footpath issue at another site in Bottesford. So I'm asking the feel for members on these changes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchett. I'll come to the office in a second for any comments they want to make about the bridge and the footpaths. Tom, would you like to make a comment about the bus stops?
Only that we can't put in the section 106 to require it because we're not the local highway authority. But it depends what the condition says. I've not read that condition, but the condition will probably require the detail anyway. So that may be able to come later, but it's probably a better question for the planners.
think the challenge that we have, Councillor Pritchett, is that we could probably ask for a bus stop, but we have no ability to control whether a bus would ever visit, because that would require a change to the route of the bus, which is then part of the public transport strategy, changes to the timetables, etc., etc. And that's what the county council has the control over.
Yeah, that can be quite good because we have a flexible service now, a sensible flexible service from, I forget the name now, a bus service. And we've all been asked before by the county council to put bus stops on routes where buses never go. We never have done and never will. Yes, I know we can do it, but the asking for one on Nottingham Road where there's no footpath, there's hills, and they've got to walk a mile. The road in's 0.7 miles. They cannot walk that. So we can point it out to them. They've offered a trade in their consultation responses, so we can. And it's the same, we can make the case for the Devon lane change. It's quite straightforward.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins, and then Councillor Mason.
Well, thanks for the officers just clarifying that. And as Councillor Pritchett was just saying, I think some of this is, and we've got a lot of members of the public here, and some of the members are probably seeing how difficult it is to be a planning decision maker, because some of this sounds as if there's no common sense to it, as you know. Because I wouldn't want people in my village to walk that particular distance. And especially if you're in hills. But anyway, what I was going to say just on the affordable housing, if members are minded to, and I know, as Sarah said, that the mix of it can be determined tonight, I'd be more than happy that the ward councillors have that delegation, because I don't know necessarily what specific would work for Bottesford per se, but the ward councillors would know probably a lot better and could probably work with the parish council. So I'm happy for putting that reference in if whoever proposes seconds, if it goes through, would accept that. But it's just because if someone asks me what would the mix be, I don't have enough information. But I'm sure the ward, in consultation with the ward councillors, they would have a better feel for it.
I'll just clarify that, but we're not discussing mix tonight, are we? And for affordable, yeah. Yeah, okay. Councillor Mason, then Councillor Allnut.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for this in advance. You've all sat through me going off on analysis, but picking up on the points that made by Councillor Brown and Councillor Higgins, I'd just like to pick up on various points, in particular the road network in and around the site. There's very little to go on, although the information provided by the applicant has been approved by Leicester Highways. I've endeavoured to do a sense check on the information as provided by the consultants ADC. There's very little in here that gives me any information to go on, but one piece of information, just to give a sense check on whether the roads in and around the site makes sense, is the information that's been provided by the consultant with regard to the junction between Nottingham Road and Longhedge Lane. That's the T junction at the top, and if you go up the road, the bridge, there's a bridge to the left, and that road goes down to the A52, and they're actually given some information regarding that. I'm not going to bore you with all the detail because it's just too much, but I'll try and condense it down as much as I possibly can, if you'll allow me. In the report, to analyse the speed that people approach from the east and the west along Nottingham Road towards the Longhedge, they being ADC, carried out a manual speed survey along that site, along that road. And they recorded that although it's within a 40-mile-an-hour zone, the traffic, 85% of the traffic travelled under 30 miles per hour. just under from the west it was 29.9, and from the east it was 29.5. So it's just under. This leads you on to a design guide that I take it that if the travel is at 85% of the traffic does travel at 30 miles an hour, that road or that junction can be considered safe because of the sight lines either side. That's what the guidelines said. So it all hinges on the speed that vehicles are approaching that junction. The first thing I'd like to say is that the survey was carried out on the 27th of March 2018. There's a convention in some of the guidance, and that's why I asked a gentleman which guidance they'd used. There's a convention in some guidance that all speed surveys should be carried out on what's called a neutral day. And by and large, these neutral days are any day, any weekday between March and September. And those days then should be then modified, and no survey should be taken on a local holiday. The first thing I'd point out that 27th of March 2018 was a school holiday in Bottesford. That gave me some cause for concern. Travelling on from that, because of the speeds that they put forward, it appears in the report that the junction is safe. If you look at the metrics, it's only just safe, I believe, but that needs to be tested out. And the word in the report says that the junction should be acceptable. You've heard me bang on here many, many times about words in reports. Shall, should, would, could. They mean a lot to me. But the word should is not a definitive, definite term that I would want to use. When I offer up whether or not the I've got no other data for any other of the junctions, so I can't comment on that. It's just this one junction that I'm trying to comment on. There's much more that lies behind that. But having said that, there needs to be some sort of guidance that people must use to do these tests, and indeed there is guidance. The guidance is currently, I believe, if I can just bear with me, is CA 185, Highways England guidance, and their guidance is that the speed surveys should be done on 2 separate occasions, and 200 speeds checks should be taken. That wasn't done for this particular junction. It was done between 1:30 and 4:30 on one day on a school holiday, which goes against that. Now, I don't know which guidance they're using. I'll make that quite clear. But the former guidance, TA 22/81, was also based on 200 and 2 or more occasions is what it says in that guidance. What I'm trying to say is, based on what I can gather from the ADC report, and based on what I can gather, that the Leicester County Highways is saying that this is safe. When I look at the data that underpins why they're saying it's safe, the surveys don't seem to have been carried out correctly. Now, I can't say whether that's definitive, that that's right. What I can say is, in accordance with the guides that I've seen, I don't think it has been carried out correctly, but they may be carried out to another set of specifications. But I do think we should understand what guidance they followed and what guidance they should have followed, and if the guidance they've followed is correct, why is it correct? I'll leave that for the rest of the debate.
Can I just clarify then that what you're saying is that if we were minded to accept this application, it would have to be dependent on, because we can't answer that question now or this evening, but it would need to be dependent on that the Highways Authority confirmed to us that that was either done properly and therefore their conclusions are safe, or if not, we would need them to go back and redo that. Is that what is it? Kind of almost concisely?
I think that's it in a nutshell. What I want to know is, or what I want to know is, and the committee to know is, that these speed tests and the metrics behind the speed tests, which allows sight lines to be 30-mile-an-hour sight lines in a 40-mile-an-hour zone, are safe. And I want to know what guidance was used to provide the metrics for that. And if it's not correct, they need redoing.
Okay, then was Councillor Alden next, unless you wanted to pick up on that. Can we come back to it? Yeah, Councillor Alden.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the officers for a good report and for the support they've given the committee in answering technical questions since the report was published. With one exception, page 36, third bullet point down, a design speed of 330 miles per hour is acceptable. I think that must be a typo. I won't sack you for that. No. I also want to thank the objectors and the proponents of the application for a very balanced and fair-minded approach to this. It's quite clear, Chair, that there is a substantial feeling in the room from everybody that it's a good thing to get this development up and running. What we're arguing about is detail and the quality of the information and getting it right. And the last speakers about road safety had that in a nutshell, didn't they? Now, from what I hear and what I've read and what I've been told, I think that the flooding issue, the fear of that, can be handled through reserved matters, providing the officers can assure me that we've got a backstop on that. That's what I need, a backstop. I want to hear that we can say, look, this is not good enough at some point, and we've got to stop it in some way or pause it. That's what I need to hear. I did hear from the officers a set of words about the mix of housing, and that was good. And I agree with Councillor Pritchard, if we can get something in the recommendation that takes cognizance of bus stops. Making a provision for a bus stop is not the same thing as erecting a bus stop. And indeed, the Borough Council funds bus stops occasionally, and so do parishes. So that could be that, but we need to put a marker down so that there is at least a space to stop the bus. If it's not the bus, it could be the refuse van. So there's nothing lost by having the ability to do that, and that can be progressed in due course. But I think for me, this key point is the one that we've just been talking about, the road safety issue. Now, I'm absolutely certain that the applicant is not minded to do something that's bad. They want to do something that's good. I can see that, I can hear it. But we must find a way before we conclude tonight of ensuring that this problem is revisited and reassessed. It's not to impugn the integrity of officers at the county council or to suggest that they're not doing something right. It's just things move on, matters change, and we do need to have that reassurance. God forbid that anybody died on that road because we hadn't at this stage got it right. Now, I appreciate we're at outline planning and there's a lot of things to go under the bridge, hopefully not too much water, but I need some reassurance that we can do that. If we can do that, then I think I would be in favour of supporting the application, but I do need that reassurance, otherwise I shall vote against it.
Okay, I'll just come to Councillor Pritchett then, and then I'll come back to the officers.
Thank you. What falls out of this speed checking is the 85th percent of the vehicle speed that is used in visibility display calculations, right? Now, the visibility display calculations are laid out in National Guide and also in the Highways Guide for Leicestershire County Council. The report that accompanied and followed on from that speed testing, 7.15, talks about the western view at 79 metres, exceeding the 43 metres required. It doesn't say anything about the eastern view, which they claim to be 39 metres, is less than the 43 metres. There is nobody, if you measure that, the view to the brow of that hill bridge from that junction is 39 metres. And I challenge that 39 metres. And I've had 8 to 10 people going up there today, you know.
Okay, can I just, sorry, Louise, just to try and give some of that confidence.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing from around the room is you're kind of on board with the allocation and the local plan. You're on board with the development, but you have some concerns, and I understand that entirely. So what mechanism we have as officers that may be able to assist you is the conditions for the further information to come forward. So as the agent spoke about earlier in terms of flooding and drainage, that will be subject to testing, and then we'll come forward again for assessment, etc. There are other things that have been spoken about within the debate with regards to the section 106. So what we can do as officers is we can, a motion could be, if you were minded to approve, it could be the conditions detailed in section 10, along with the additional condition that we mentioned earlier regarding market housing to come forward. It also then goes into the recommendation for entering into a section 106, and that can be amended. For example, obligations detailed at paragraph 7.1.2 plus the footbridge requirement. Open space, 14% affordable housing, 10-year split to be agreed. Late stage review mechanism. And then within that, we can put words along the line of agree with LCC regards to the provision of a bus stop within the site. And then we can also add a further clause to that along the lines of confirmation that the speed tests undertaken at the junction of Long Hedge Lane and Nottingham Road have been undertaken in accordance with and meet the relevant Leicestershire County Council requirements for speed tests taken by handheld device. What that does then is give you that additional layer that if there is something there which isn't as it should be, the matter comes back to committee and can be further assessed. However, if the matters are all in line and that reassurance is provided, the application is approved as per the recommendation.
Sorry, because Councillor Ulnett actually left the room for a short. Do you mind? Because just to allow him to be able to vote, I'd like you to go through your statement again. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, okay. It's been requested that we take a 5-minute break. I apologise to all the people waiting, but we'll take a 5-minute break. And just to just not a warning, but just remember, please don't mix or talk to anybody from the public gallery. But I will give you 5 minutes. So we will reconvene at 5 to 8. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're all present again. If we can draw ourselves back to the meeting. Are we all ready? In that case, then I'd like to go back to my request to Louise, or whether that's Tom now, to actually just recover some of the points that were made while Councillor Olnert was out of the room. Yeah.
So from the debate that was occurring and the discussions that were taking place, from that, I've written some notes, and the concerns that I heard during the debate related primarily around the provisions of the Section 106, and then taking into account some of the discussions around the local highway authority with the bus stop and the accuracy of the speed tests that were undertaken. So what we have penned together is an alternative to the recommendation that was been presented to you. Members, if they're mindful to approve, could approve subject to 1, the conditions detailed in section 10, with an additional condition requiring the market housing to come forward in accordance with policy 10 of the Bottesford neighbourhood plan. 2, entering of a section 106 to secure obligations detailed at paragraph 7.1.2 plus the footbridge requirement. 2, open space. 3, 14% affordable housing, 10-year split to be agreed. 4, late stage review mechanism. Point 3 of the approval, discussions with the local highway authority to ascertain an on-site bus stop can be provided by the developer. 4 of the approval, confirmation that the speed tests undertaken at the junction of Longhedge Lane and Nottingham Road have been undertaken in accordance with and meet the relevant Leicestershire County Council requirements for speed tests taken by handheld device to be agreed by the Chair in consultation with the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee. Now, what that amended recommendation does is allow the approval to be given tonight, but subject to those further details coming forward, being investigated and providing that layer of assurance, which I think Councillor Brown was asking for earlier. So that is an alternative approval should members be minded to grant consent this evening.
Thank you, Louise. That was great. Just because Councillor Mason asked the question, particularly on the speed. Would that cover your point? Yeah.
Chair, yeah, my main point is it needs to be in conjunction with you and myself.
That's fine. There was one, but Councillor Higgins.
Quickly, affordable housing, if we could have in consultation with the ward councillors on that one, to be agreed in consultation with the ward councillors. The tenure.
Thank you. All the Section 106 will require is the submission of a scheme to be agreed by the local authority. So I assume the planners can take that away to ensure that that happens, but it wouldn't necessarily be part of the 106 because it's the next bit.
Give you the details in writing tomorrow, but my only concern about that is that you're mandated to speak to them, but you could come back and say no. I think we feel we need to achieve the right footways into the village and safe. I think it needs to be achieved. The other issue I've got to be, if you could satisfy me on the other issue I've got concern with is how do we know this report is being done properly? And what happens then if it comes back unsafe, right? Or
which report are you referring to?
The junction displays and the work that
this speed.
Yeah.
I mean that's what we've just sort of covered in saying that I and the Vice Chair, because I don't want to take it on my own, basically, would need to approve that and if it wasn't, it would need to go back and be redone. And therefore, any subsequent design changes leading from that change would then need to be made.
You satisfied me on that one. It's just that I do need these section 106 are important for the site, you know, and I can't have it that somebody doesn't achieve it but says, oh, we asked them. And the process, you know, we've got this way because the process has been flawed in control at MBC. It should have been sorted by now. It's easy. It's no big deal. So I'm not in terms of the changing the one cycle way for 100 yards this way to 100 yards this way, I don't see as a particular problem. But and what I didn't add to that having not done it properly, it's a mess, which I'll put in writing. We're left, the parish council, scratching about for bike racks, you know, that they've not done the job properly. So I can go along with that if I can get some guarantee that it can be achieved, which I don't see it's a problem. And then the only other issue after that is, when you're ready, is the NHS check.
Sorry, do you want to go with the NHS one now?
Yeah, the report's got a double claim in it. It's a quirk that the Leicestershire Integrated Care Board have submitted a claim and calculation for all patients on the site for Long Clawson and Crowson, whilst the catchment, well, it's an overlapping catchment area. The main patients go to, well, 95% go to the Welby practice or Long Bennington, and I don't see why the applicant should be having to pay for that.
Yeah, I think it was answered in the report, but Louise, do you want to restate?
Yeah, so as we've already suggested to you, Councillor Pritchett, 2 contributions have been requested, one from Lincolnshire, one from Leicestershire. Both state that certain practices have the potential to be affected by the proposal. Should committee be minded to approve, we will ensure that double counting does not take place. In the event that there is an overlap of requests, then the money shall be redistributed towards affordable housing.
In plain English, does that mean you're scrubbing the double claim?
If there is one.
Well, there is one, isn't there? It's there. They're claiming the same thing for the same patients. It's not marginal. There's not a marginal claim. It's a full claim. 2 full claims, Margaret.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying, that it will be checked, and if there is, whether it's a full or partial or whatever, that will be addressed, and the money will then be reused. Yeah, okay. Councillor Mason.
To detail, Chair.
Well, don't argue. Which, you know,
no. What I'm hearing so far, I really like. That's good. What I'm not hearing either in Louise's words or from other reassurances is my concern about the flooding issue. I posited the idea that it might be okay within reserved matters, but I want to hear from officers how we can grab hold of that and make certain that further action is taken to ensure that our friends in Bottesford are not inundated because of changing circumstances. So I just want something in there and some guidance from officers to help and to give reassurance, because this is a very serious matter, flooding currently across the borough, and we can't rely on old data, old maps and old ideas. We have to grab this one, otherwise it's going to get worse, and not just in Bottesford.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just phoning until I know that Louise or Sarah are ready. Louise, thank you.
Yeah, so within the report, there are various conditions relating to drainage with matters coming forward at reserve matters stage. But if I can take you to 10.11, which is page 76 of the report, that condition is particularly pertinent because there it says no development approved by this planning permission shall take place until such time as infiltration testing has been carried out or suitable evidence to preclude testing to confirm or otherwise the suitability of the site for the use of infiltration as a drainage element has been submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. What that means in layman's terms is there needs to be some further work undertaken on the site. There needs to be some testing conducted. Should that testing come back negative, then obviously the development can't go ahead. So there is still a hurdle to climb in the sense of providing suitable evidence to say that that land is suitable. So what that condition does is provide that reassurance. If it can't be provided, the development fails at that stage.
I just need a little bit more reassurance. That's good so far as it goes. But what I want to know is who's marking the exam paper, and do we get a chance to say adjudicate on that exam mark? Because there's a certain amount of self-marking goes on in planning. I find, and I just need to know that there's an opportunity for us as an authority to say, oh, we don't actually, this doesn't look good, and therefore we stop. So please advise me.
Sorry, Rachel, do you want to? Yeah.
So the condition requires that information to be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. So that will come into us and it will go out. It will be published data, so you can see that and comment on that.
And the parish can see it.
They can. See it. Yeah.
Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I'll just wait for Louise. This is a Louise question. Sorry, Louise. Could you read out the specific a condition regarding the speed testing again, please?
Yeah, so that was part of the approved subject to, and part of that we said confirmation that the speed tests undertaken at the junction of Long Hedge Lane and Nottingham Road have been undertaken in accordance with and meet the relevant Leicestershire County Council requirements for speed tests taken by handheld device to be agreed by the Chair in consultation with the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions about the illustrative layout diagram that I think was flashed up as part of the presentation right at the beginning, but doesn't form part of the briefing pack. And I know it's illustrative and we're only at the outline planning permission at the moment, but it does seem to show development right up against the flood zone 3 area, which is a bit of a concern to me. But on the diagram itself, there are some buildings shown as potential locations of landmark buildings. What are landmark buildings?
So to add interest to the development, they'll select landmark buildings. So if you're, say, driving into it and there's a particular corner that might be a landmark building, so it might have more detail on it than something that you're not going to see as obvious. So it's more of it might be a more prominent building that when you're driving in. So that might be, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. That. So my last question then, and then I've got a point of concern. How big does the development need to be before we consider the need for shops within it?
The allocation is for residential development only, so it's not an allocation for any sort of retail or employment, so it's for residential.
Right, so that's the application. But how big a development, at what point do we need to consider the need for shops within a development, whether it's part of this application or not? Because at 215 houses, that's quite a large estate, and there appears to be no provision for shops.
Yeah. It's normally sort of a mixed allocation if you're going to do that. There's no sort of specific sort of measurement of houses. You'd normally see that on something like a sustainable urban extension where you'd have shops, potentially a school, a new school, or things like that. But for a site of 215, there's not a specific requirement to have shops.
Thank you. Then, and last but not least, my point of concern really is the indicative plan shows only a single vehicle access to the estate, which brings with it risk. One of the risks, I guess, would be a sense of isolation if we're not careful. And I don't know whether when a formal plan comes to us, whether we can have more than one vehicle access. It's great that we're thinking about footpath access and cycle access, but most people, let's be honest, will get in the car to drive to the shops. And if there's only one way in and only one way out, they're not going to feel part of the wider Bottesford community if we're not careful.
Before Don blows another valve, I'll just actually say that there is a part in the report which says that the road is deemed, because it's a two-lane road, that it's deemed okay as the only route in and out. The routes to the pathways that Don has been talking about are the access to the village, and they're actually closer than that. So that's why Don is quite yeah.
It's because of the cycle lanes and the path. The ambulance people and what have you have said it. They said it's all right. Just going back, if I could, Chair, to what Louise read out for the answer to Councillor Mason's question, I would like to add at the end of that, not just the speed test, that you and the Vice Chair review any relating visibility, display and safety calculations and conclusions, because that's what it's all done for. It's done not just speed for speed. It's that's the purpose of it.
I think, I mean, Tom might correct me in a second. The point is that we could only challenge the design if we found that the testing was incorrect. If it's deemed as correct and we can't challenge that, then I don't think we can actually challenge the design.
I think that I've introduced something that all the locals will know, that 39 metres, which is less than the 43 metres acceptable, has been glossed over in their own report and not picked up on. And it's that I'm doubt. So I want you to see both when they do the speed testing, they will redo the calculation, and it's the totality I want you to review. There's no problem in that.
Thank you, Chair. So the way that it's worded at the moment is that it's not a recalculation, it's confirmation that the speed tests that were taken were appropriate for that site. So if they say that they were appropriate testings and therefore the results are the same, nothing will change. If, however, they say that was wrong, it's 40 miles, for example, the whole thing would have to be redone and we'd be back here. So if there was an inaccuracy, the whole thing falls apart, it has to be done again.
Change the motion to actually include the calculation.
If the test was done correctly and within the rules, we can't. Is
Yes,
my understanding.
You check the visibility displays are correct.
But you're saying the visibility display, what you just said, is based upon the speed.
Yeah, and the accuracy of it with the brow of the bridge and the relative calculations of it.
So therefore, if it was wrong, it would be redone. Yeah.
It's 39 metres.
So are we talking about the speed? So they concluded that it was based on a 30 miles per hour, and that's what that test was done upon.
Yeah.
What Councillor Mason queried was that speed wasn't an accurate representation of that. So what we're asking them to do is confirm that it was based on the way that they did the testing. If they say yes, that is all accurate, and the chair, in consultation with the vice chair, agree that, then there would be no change. However, if they say that testing was inaccurate and actually no, that hasn't produced the right results, realistically it's going to be higher. It's going to be in the 40 miles an hour zone, and therefore the displays need to be wider. The whole exercise has to be redone. This application would come back to committee. That's why we've done it as approved subject to.
How do I introduce then what happens then if I get two specialists out independently and they do a signed report that it isn't a 39 metre display? Where do you go with that one then?
At that point, I would stress that you provide that to the chair and the vice chair, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to decide whether they're happy with what's being provided by the county council, and they'll take professional advice upon that. So if you've got some professional advice that contradicts it, they will look at it all as a package. So that would be my advice to how to deal with that.
That, but I mean, it's also the same as making sure they do the job themselves well, rather than me having to do the job.
Councillor Olnett.
Chair, I think I heard Tom say that it will be for yourself and the vice chair to agree the report back from whoever does the confirming that it's okay. So there's still within that motion the ability of yourselves to challenge it if they say it is okay. So if my mucker over there says, well, what methodology did you use? And was it done on the wrong day of the year? And shouldn't it have been done twice? There's that opportunity for you to challenge. And indeed, there will be an opportunity to pick up Councillor Pritchard's Don's point that if he's got his wallet out and he's going to rush out tomorrow afternoon and get two experts, you can bang it in to your colleagues to help them challenge whatever they're being told.
But just make it clear, it doesn't matter whether you're coming 10 miles an hour, 50 miles, 200 miles an hour, 39 metres from your viewing position of X, 2.4 metres away in your car, it's still the same.
I think we're getting too much. It is Councillor Higgins, but was it Councillor Mason? Okay, Councillor Higgins.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd just like to thank all the members and the officers, because I think it's been said, it's very clear that there's been some concerns raised and some technical data concerns raised, which I've got faith in you and the vice chair of doing that on behalf of the committee. And I'd like to thank the officers for the work they've done to convey what has been said in this, quite lengthy debate. I'd also like to just congratulate the parish council as well, just on their projects for the Section 106. And for any other parish council in Melton, I think this is an absolute ace idea of how Bottesford Parish Council have shown how other communities can extract some funding from developers, and I like the projects that they've done, and in the parish forum, I know it's not planning, maybe that could be shared with other parish councils because they've worked hard on that. But I think all my concerns, and I know other members, and I'd like to thank members for some members have taken particular points and researched them there, and that's helped me, and so I'd like to thank members there. But I think at some point we're probably going to have to decide, have we got all the conditions we want, and is it acceptable or is it a refusal? So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think we have debated this. Would anybody like to make a proposal, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I'll make the proposal subject to all the conditions as read out, and I can't even remember them, so I'm going to have to rely on the officers. But I think there's a consensus around the room. I think we've taken this as far as what we can at this stage. So yeah, I'll recommend approve with the conditions.
Thank you. Does anybody like to second, Councillor? Okay, Councillor Ganser, you second.
I'm quite happy to second. I've sat here very quiet because I'm not feeling too good tonight. But yes, after what we've heard and the extra conditions, I'm quite happy to second this motion. Thank you.
So, Councillor Cumbers, sorry.
And I appreciate how much work has been done by the officers and the debate here. But what I can't get round is if we allow outline permission, we've established that that development can go ahead, then it is very, very difficult afterwards to start trying to sort of undo things a bit. That's my feeling, so that's my comment. And I won't be supporting approval.
Do you have any other comments? In that case, then we have a proposal and a seconder to accept the application. Can I ask all those in favour to raise their hands? Those against? One. And abstain? One. So that motion carries. The application is accepted. And Councillor Cumbers would like a vote accepted. Are you okay with that? Do you have the count? One. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for all the work that was put into that report, and for the work by some of the members in actually going further with that. So thank you. I do apologise to all of the people that were waiting for the Asfordby Road, but we will now move on to that application. Councillor Atherton, Siggy Atherton, will leave the committee. I'll just wait for everybody to settle down, and then we'll thank you as also Amy for waiting this long. If you would like to make your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This application refers to land to the rear of 249 and 251 Asfordby Road in the main urban area of Melton Mowbray. The application is presented due to the number of objections we have received. 114 objections have been received in total, 62 to the original scheme and 52 to the revised. Next slide, please. The proposed development comprises the erection of one 4-bedroom dwelling with access from Chetwynd Drive. The site is located in the main urban area in flood zone 1, and there are no ecological constraints on site. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the proposals have been amended since its first submission to us. The original proposals for 4 dwellings are shown on the screen now, and it was considered to be out of keeping with the character of the area and a cramped form of development. Next slide, please. The proposal is now reduced in terms of site area and the amount of development on the site. Land to the rear of 253 Asfordby Road is omitted from the red line boundary now. Next slide, please. To give an overview of how the impact to residential amenity of the existing properties is assessed, I've provided the diagram on the screen which shows the separation distances between the proposed development and its direct neighbours. There is approximately 10 metres between the proposed dwelling and the side elevation of 25 Chetwynd Drive to the south of the site, as shown in green. The proposed development does not directly face this property, and the windows to the front elevation of the proposed development overlook the public highway. There are no windows on the side elevation of 25 Chetwynd Drive. 1 and 2 Riverside Road are located to the east of the site. There is a 25-metre separation distance between the properties and the proposal, as shown in purple on screen, and the 2 windows which would serve bathrooms in the eastern elevation of the proposed dwelling are to be secured by condition to be obscure glazed. The properties to the north of the site on Asfordby Road are located approximately 27 metres from the proposed dwelling, as shown in blue. Next slide, please. It is noted that these properties are set at a higher level than the existing ground level of the application site. Whilst details of site levels and finished floor levels of the proposal are required as a suggested pre-commencement condition, the applicant has provided a section to demonstrate levels and separation distances. It should be noted that this section is indicative only, and details would still need to be agreed as part of the condition if planning permission was granted tonight. Melton's design SPD states that the minimum back-to-back distance between habitable rooms should be 21 metres. Where dwellings differ in height, the back-to-back distance should be increased in separation by 2 metres for each additional 1 metre of elevation. There is a 2.5 metre difference between land levels here, as demonstrated on screen using the blue box. As per the guidance, the minimum separation distances shall be increased by 5 metres, resulting in a required separation between the properties of 26 metres. As you can see, at over 27 metres, this is shown to be exceeded and therefore gives no rise for me to have concern. Next slide, please. The proposed development is in keeping with the character and built form of existing development in the immediate area on Chetwynd Drive, as shown on the photos on screen now. Materials of the proposed development would be agreed by condition. The existing turning head on Chetwynd Drive falls outside of the application site and would be retained. Next slide, please. So to summarise, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable in accordance with policy SS2, as it is located within the main urban area of Melton Mowbray. No objections have been raised by technical consultees and a safe and suitable access is proposed. Off-street parking is provided in accordance with the Highways Design Guide. There is no undue impact to residential amenity, and the design of the development is in keeping with existing development. Conditions are recommended for details of site levels, drainage and materials to be agreed. As such, it is recommended that the application is approved.
Thank you, Amy. Do any members have any questions for clarification? Councillor Higgins.
Could you just put I think it was the first slide, but it was the one where with the proposed development and the neighbouring gardens. Could you put that slide up on, please? Or that one will be fine. Yes. So in there is just a question for clarification. So do we have to view privacy about someone in the gardens that fall outside of that red line? So say if I was in the back garden there, is that a sensitive area for privacy? Because I totally get living space, and you've demonstrated why that probably is acceptable, but privacy for those back gardens or any potential right to light issues or shadowing. But that's over to you. Thank you, Amy.
So right to light is separate from planning. In terms of overshadowing, I think that's covered in the report, and given the separation distances, I've got no concerns. Just in terms of your comment regarding the amenity, the garden areas, the separation distances are exceeded as they are set out in our design SPD. The development is representative of standard practice for back-to-back dwellings, and as I've demonstrated on one of the slides, the actual distance is exceeded by this development, and that takes account of amenity areas, which includes gardens, and the garden sizes which are to be retained at 249 and 251 Asfordby and the proposed development are considered to be appropriate.
So I'm on about the gardens immediately to the left and the right. Is that what you're on about? So I'm not on about the gardens of the houses you pointed to for privacy. I'm on about the immediate left of that red line and immediate right of that line.
So 253 Asfordby Road, is that
if that's what 253 is, yes, then that one, and then what is it, 247? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so given the scale of the development, the amount of development will not cover the entire site area. Therefore, I don't have any concerns in terms of the impact on their amenity or the opportunity for them to use their garden space.
Councillor Cumbers.
Yeah, on page 96, I noticed that someone has various objections, and there's an assertion that badgers have been seen. As we know, badgers are protected, and their foraging areas as well are protected. Did you follow up at all with that? You know, because the rest of the paper indicates that there won't be badgers, and it does look a bit unlikely to me. But if somebody has said that they've seen badgers, then I would have thought that should have been looked at.
Yeah, so when I received the comment regarding potential for badgers on the site, I did consult with we don't know where the photograph was taken, and I consulted with ecology, who obviously understand the constraints of the site. Their comments are included at 7.1.6 of the report on the 7th of August 2024. That comment came in after we had received the email about potential badgers. and they've stated that no records of protected species are in the immediate vicinity that a development like this would impact.
I'm sorry, but someone's saying that they've seen badgers. You know, and a report made by an organisation, however reputable, elsewhere. I mean, it could well be that that person has dreamt they saw badgers, but I'm surprised that they weren't actually, it wasn't followed up. Because if there are badgers, then that's something really serious.
It was followed up with the county ecologist, and their comments are provided in the report.
Can we come back to that in the debate? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Councillor Cumber's point. The house opposite, number 25, Chetwynd Drive, not the bungalow at the end, it's the end house. They've got photos. They've had muntjac deer in their garden, foxes, badgers, ducks and different kinds of birds in her garden, along with bats flying overhead. Now,
This is a point for clarification.
yeah,
it
is
in debate.
to say what Pat Cumbers has said, and I just want to say that she has photos, so you can have clarification on that as well, because she's shown me the photos of it in her garden.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just going to echo, sorry, I'm just going to echo what I've said, that we have consulted with ecology, the county ecologist, and their comments are provided in the report.
And so on that.
Yes. Could we have this slide on the section, the indicative section? That's the blue one. No, that's the plan. No, it's for that's it. Now, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to see some more visuals, which we didn't have in the report. So this is really helpful. I'm having difficulty understanding that particular section. Where is Chetwynd? Is that on the right or is that on the left?
So, sorry, I perhaps should have gone into more detail with it. 25 Chetwynd Drive is the house shown on the very left of the screen.
Right.
The proposed development is in the centre, if you like, and 251 Asfordby is shown at the very right. So it's a section that goes pretty much north to south through the site.
Now, I'm even more confused now. I thought I understood the Chetwynd bit because that's at the bottom. That's where the hammerhead is, yeah? Okay. So looking up the other way, that would be, so that you're saying that's 251. So 247 is sort of this way, looking at that, isn't it? Is that right? Because 247 is the one that's to the right, the neighbour to the right. If you go back, perhaps if we go back to the other plan, the ground plan. Now there we go. So, right. Oh, right. Okay. So if you look to the red of the right line, the right of the red line. Sorry. Yeah, it's too much gin. Yeah. That's 247, isn't it? 249. That is 247. So without going to the blue section, if on that blue section the left hand side was where the hammerhead is, and then you said the right hand side was 251, but what that doesn't really show is the effect of that section on 247, if you see what I mean. And what I need to understand is how the measurements that you indicated in that section affect that right hand dwelling 247. I can't quite see that in that section.
So in that section drawing, is the building on the right?
This is a clarification for the officer, not yeah, not to debate, but sorry. So what is the question?
All right, go put. Sorry, Chair. If we could put the blue section back on again. Right. So what I was initially told. Sorry, oh, it's you. You're causing trouble here. Yeah. So 247 is sort of towards me if I look at that diagram. Is that correct? Because you said that the right hand side is 251. I mean, relating it to the block. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. So we've got 27.38 meters to house 251. So that's the same for 247, is it? It's the same length. That's how. That's what. Yeah, slightly more. You'll say it's slightly. Okay. Okay. So in terms of the regulations, there's plenty of distance that way. Now, what about height? Are you saying that the new building is lower than the existing buildings, 251, 247? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so
I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just trying to get myself in your
So
clear.
this section is indicative only. So we do have a condition which does require for the details to come forward in terms of the actual site levels before any commencement of the development on the site. But there is some confidence in that this assessment has taken place by the applicant, hence why they are happy to provide it to us.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Mason.
On the same slide, the thin grey line. There's my eyes are terrible. I'm sorry about this, but there's a thin grey line that there's a gradient that goes from one house to the other house. Is that the land? Is that the topography of the land?
Yes, so on the right-hand side in the garden area of 251 Asfordby, that does state a retaining wall at the end of their garden.
Just on that, can I follow up to the Chair? Just on that, there's no flooding risk there, is there? Because there's obviously that slopes away into the garden adjacent to it. Is there any flood risk? Because
we have asked for drainage details to come forward as part of a condition as well, just to make sure.
Any other questions for clarification? Councillor Atherton.
So I'd just like to come back to badgers, please. Paragraph 8.7.3 of the report states that objections have been received which state the presence of wildlife within the application site, including badgers. Goes on to mention other wildlife, and right at the end of it, it says see informative at paragraph 11.2. Paragraph 11.2 talks about bats and birds, but not about badgers or any other wildlife. Is there a sentence or two missing from paragraph 11.2?
Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, just specifically about the badgers, there is also the Protection of Badgers Act 1992, and it's a criminal offence to interfere with a badger set, amongst other things, without reasonable excuse. So they are protected in other ways. Planning Commission doesn't allow you to go and do whatever you want to the badgers. They are protected still, and you don't need to condition, and you shouldn't condition something that's already law in any event. I don't know if that assists at all.
Councillor Cumbers.
Can I say, and I understand that it's not just their sets and everything, it's where they forage is also protected. And if they're there, they must be foraging.
Sorry, can we keep this back to the debate rather than yeah, well, it's just because I want to give these people have been waiting a long time. I want to give them a chance for their speakers as well. Are we all happy? Right. Okay. So therefore, I'd like to call upon Graham Spencer, who's a local resident talking against the application. Thank you very much for taking your time, especially thanks very much for the amount of time you've been waiting to make this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, you've already found the button for the written. So you have 3 minutes as per all the speakers. Tom will give you a warning at 30 seconds, and if you could start closing your argument at that point, very much appreciated. Thanks very much, and continue when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of all the many people who have objected to the proposal. No one wants to deny a family the right to live in a new home with lovely surroundings. However, this proposed new house will be built in the gardens of 2 existing established properties. The new development will not be in keeping with its surroundings or in any way enhance the locality. As existing residents, we have a legitimate concern of the overshadowing effect of the property and the loss of privacy exacerbated by the way the land lies. The local community has highlighted that this is a valuable habitat for wildlife, of which you've been talking about, which are protected. These gardens are not just unused parcels of land, but a much-loved critical natural environment teeming with wildlife and vegetation. Removal of trees and shrubs will add to the existing water runoff problems. We only have to look around Melton to the new builds following the Melton local plan to see that houses like this one proposed are being erected on far more appropriate sites. We strongly believe there should be no need to resort to building in back gardens. Households in general have several vehicles needing parking space. This is already a real problem in Chetwynd Drive. Added to the increased use, which there will be, of delivery vehicles and their speeds, the congestion is very bad at times. As it stands, there could be danger to children and elderly people using Chetwynd Drive. With a 4-bedroomed house, there could be 4 cars, if not more. The visiting extra cars will have no choice but to park on Chetwynd Drive. This will be an extra strain on a very busy road. Once built, the residents of Chetwynd Drive will have to deal with this problem daily. The mental health and well-being of residents should be priority of every council. This is already causing a lot of stress for everyone. We do question what the benefits are of building this one large 4-bedroomed double-storey house in such a small area. There does not seem to be any tangible reason why it is deemed appropriate.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the members if any would like to ask for any questions for clarification from the speaker. No, nobody's looking at me. Thank you very much for your talk. Thank you very much for attending. I'd next like to call upon David Homewood, the applicant, talking for the application. Thank you, Mr. Homewood. Thank you. As well with all others, you have 3 minutes. Please start when you're ready. Tom will give you a 30-second warning, and please start to close. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is David Homewood, and I'm the applicant in respect of the proposal. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am the representative of myself and my 2 brothers, and this is my late parents' property, 249 Asfordby Road, and we're applying in conjunction with next door, which is 251 Asfordby Road. As you'll be aware, the site lies within the sustainable town of Melton Mowbray, the first tier within the hierarchy, and therefore wholly in accordance with the development strategy set out within the policies SS1 and SS2 of the local plan. The scheme has been reduced from 4 dwellings to a single dwelling with 4 off-street parking spaces. So that addresses some of the concerns raised earlier on the parking. This revised proposal exceeds the council's requirements in respect of car parking provision and has an access drive from Chetwynd Drive, which has been designed in accordance with the Highways Authority. There is therefore no objection for this proposal from the Highways Authority. So we did actually commission a study from Edwards and Edwards, and they fully supported this, and that's in the proposal. Separation distances between the proposed dwellings and all neighbouring properties also significantly exceed the requirements of the Melton Borough Design SPD adopted in September 2021. This requires a back-to-back distance of 21 metres, while this proposal demonstrates over 27 metres. The design and street seam have been carefully considered to ensure that the frontage to Chetwynd Drive is acceptable with the new dwelling, delivering a strong addition to the public realm. The pattern, density and form of development have also been designed in accordance with the recommendations and advice from your planning officer. I recognise there are a significant number of objections to this proposal. However, the vast majority of these are not based upon legitimate planning matters, with a significant number coming from people who do not live locally. I hope that this committee will recognise and take this into account. In conclusion, we have worked with the planning officer to overcome initial concerns regarding density and character, and we hope that you can therefore support this application in accordance with your officer's recommendation of approval. Many thanks, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Olnett?
Yes, you've heard a lot of talk about badgers. Have you undertaken any research into this so far as your site is concerned, and indeed other wildlife? And what's your take on the presence of wildlife in that area?
So no, we haven't, to answer your question. I live in the area. I live on the old Riverside farm, about 200 metres away. I lived in that house for 30 years. It's the back of Chetwynd Drive, so it's close to the proximity of existing houses. There are no evidence of any badgers setts, but I'm sure wildlife passes through there the same as it does every other garden. I get wildlife passing through my garden as well in the local area, but there's no evidence of any living there.
Thank you. No, I'll just ask you, just for clarification for myself, and I could look at the design, but obviously the driveway is going to use, what is it, currently the end of the turning?
Yes, it's kind of a U-turning at the end.
So that becomes the driveway to this new house. Is there a pathway across that? Or will there be a pathway across that so that it becomes, you cannot park in that area?
Yes, there is a pathway at the moment, and that will be a no parking area.
So display should stay clear unless we can't legislate against poor parking, but
yeah,
and we're encouraging it to stay away.
Yeah, we have got 4 car parking spaces for 4-bedroomed houses. Many 4-bedroomed houses that are approved do not have 4 car parking spaces.
Sorry, I understand that. Any other members have any questions for the applicant? No, in that case then, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to therefore open it for debate. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, going back to the animals that have been found on in the garden of the house opposite number 25 Chetwynd Drive. Just because the ecologist says that there is no badgers or any other animal around there, protected animal, doesn't mean to say that his word is sacrosanct. Everybody makes mistakes. And I want the ecologist to come out and, with permission from the lady, hopefully he can go and see her and she will show him the photos of all the animals that's in her garden that do travel through. And there was one time where she said there was 7 badgers altogether in her garden, which would be like a little family of badgers. And she's even said that when she's looked out of her window, where the proposed house is going to be, the garden there, and the one next door, I believe, she says she has seen some of these animals going through the hedge or the fence where there's gaps going into that garden as well and into the neighbouring garden. So if whatever happens tonight, I want the ecologist to come out again, because everybody makes mistakes. We're all human. I'm not saying, you know, it's just something he's you know, not considered as something he's missed, but I do believe he should come out, and his word is not sacrosanct. So that's what I want to happen, whatever happens tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I just had my thoughts on that, in the fact that we're not removing all of the gardens there. The gardens will still exist, and there will still be gardens. But yeah, I understand your point. But Deleuze, can I ask you to answer some of those questions?
Yeah, of course. Completely understand your concerns and what you're saying. I think we need to be careful in terms of visiting badgers and badger sets. So it's highly unlikely there would be a badger set in a residential garden, but there may well be badgers that travel through many gardens on their nightly travels. What members might want to consider is a condition with regards to wildlife gaps in boundary treatments that would allow for that travelling wildlife to continue regardless of this development being in place. So that's something that might want to be considered.
Do you want to come back?
Yes, please. Yeah, another thing I was thinking about as well, because in the bungalow, right at the very end.
Sorry, if this is a separate
same
one.
thing. Oh no,
Okay,
it's the
carry
same
on.
one. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah. The bungalow at the end, which is next door to that house I've just been talking about, they've got a lot of trees and a lot of bushes in there, and I believe that over time, I don't think there's anybody living there now. I think they're probably dead. I'm not sure from what I can gather, but it's overgrown in that. But I would like that garden checked just to see if there is a badger set in there, because there could be. It's worth checking. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's outside of the application area. So, but if there is, they're protected under the law. Yeah, yeah. Councillor Cumbers, and then Councillor.
I was just going to say, as far as I know, nobody has visited from ecology. It's as far as I understand, the report was made and going on the evidence which exists, because people don't often report. They see a badger, but they don't think to report it. But to be so, all I was querying was the fact that there were badgers, and you hadn't apparently sort of followed that up. But to be honest, with this application, there's no indication that there are badgers there, you know, or that there's a set, or that they're foraging on that particular site. But as much as anything, I think when we're doing a report, if there's a possibility of badgers, it shouldn't just be overlooked.
Louise, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just following up on what Amy was saying in answer to that question earlier, her contact with LCC Ecology was as a direct result from the representations received. So Amy did follow those up, and Amy did make those requests to the expert bodies.
Councillor Pritchett, I think you were first.
Yes, just a general point on the design and size of the building. I'd like it to reflect the materials, to reflect the existing buildings and fit in. And the reason I say this is I've got examples of grandiose developments in such situations not looking too good. There's one somewhere that's known locally as the Premier Inn because of its design and everything. And this could be the mansion on the hill, you know, if you're not careful. And I think it's important that it blends in, you know, electric gates, you know, grey windows and all this lot, and you know, big garage doors and such like. I think there's some care needs to be done with the applicant in getting it to fit in. I think that's my concern. Having been satisfied on the distances between properties, that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I come to you, Councillor Higgins, Tom, do you want to give the ruling?
Yeah, members, we're coming up on the 3 hours of the meeting. So in accordance with the meeting procedure rules, if you wish to continue past the 3 hour mark, we need a motion that's seconded and voted upon to continue. Otherwise, the meeting will close. So, Chair, you might want to invite a motion to that extent.
Yeah, and as Tom said, yeah, Councillor Cumbers and seconded by Councillor Higgins to extend the meeting. And then we'll take the vote on the motion to continue the meeting. Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Higgins, would you like to?
I have to say the public's probably thinking my life councils are weird, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'll just move away from the badges because other people have sort of talked about that. But before I came into it, and I was just quickly researching again, just some terms, and maybe the officers want to speak because there was a recent planning inspector who criticised, I think, Dudley Council for using the term garden grabbing, because the first thing I thought was this garden grabbing. And I think that you have to have some policies based on that. So I don't know if we've put any policy about garden grabbing, because obviously it's not in the paper, which that all said is most of these types of appeals of garden grabbing, and I think I remember one in Kettleby, which eventually got overturned at appeal, and I voted to refuse on that one because it was putting something on a very small stamp. It was about privacy of the neighbours and again of the back garden. I think that one in Kettleby, I can't remember what the street name was called, but it was Louise, you took us there, and it was a very small one, yeah. And I think the lady who would have pretty much had her back garden totally faced by a window. While I probably don't really agree with what that inspector did, we sometimes have to follow those kind of rulings, but inspectors contradict themselves as well. So I don't know. I wouldn't mind just a little bit more from the officers if there's any like appeals that have been in the borough or that they know of about this type of development as well, because I think Amy's done a very good report and has considered things on the measurements, but there's something in me here where I'm like, if I was living there, I can certainly see why the objections have come in, and regardless of what happens tonight, you know, is everybody still has to work with their neighbours as well, and so yeah, it's not been an easy one. Thank you. Chair, sorry. Equally, I know if many other people were presented this opportunity, they would probably do the same as the applicant. So we've also got to understand, you know, it just is what it is. So thank you.
But I know there was some statements made about garden grabbing as not being a term that's applicable. But yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So in respect of garden grabbing or development on backland, which is sometimes referred to, many moons ago, so under the PPSs that were pre the coalition government, there was policy, I think it was PPS 3, but I could very well be incorrect, that basically discouraged at that point development on gardens. So it called it, it said it wasn't brownfield or that it should be considered as greenfield. But forgive me, it's been a very long while since I read one of the PPSs. That wasn't carried forward in the MPPF in 2012. And so there's no national policy saying no or yes. And there's nothing in the Melton local plan which specifically deals with garden land, either saying yes or no. So it's basically assessed on its individual merits.
Councillor Gordon.
Because the land itself is going downwards, right, towards Chetwynd Drive and also towards Riverside. So it's that side and it goes down that side. Now, the house opposite 25 Chetwynd Drive, her back garden is very steep at the back. And also with the gardens on Riverside, 1 and 2 Riverside. And when it only has to be a short bout of rain and the water, the grass and everything is saturated, absolutely saturated. And it's causing a lot of problems, obviously, you know, but they're coping at the moment. Now, numbers 1 and 2, they are lower than the house that's proposed. They are lower, and their gardens are quite steep this way. And the number 2, they suffer a lot. Well, they all suffer a lot with the saturated lawns and everything. And there's one part of number 2's garden that she can't even plant plants because they just get destroyed because it's waterlogged. And number one Riverside, they sometimes they have water come down, actually running down their garden, and it goes over their lawn, over their steps and onto the patio, and they have to use a bucket sometimes to remove the water, and then the water goes down the sides. So it doesn't actually go into their houses, but it's into her house, sorry, but it's quite close to it. So there is an awful problem with waterlogging, and this is a great concern because obviously with this happening, with the house being built, they're very concerned and worried that it's going to cause a lot more disastrous results, through waterlogging. And yeah, I'm trying to think now of something else. Yeah, also as well, because I think that, well, the house is overbearing anyway, and especially as it's so high and it's on that gradient on both sides, you can imagine how overbearing that's going to be if it's built. And so with the houses being a lot lower, there will be a lot of overshadowing. I know you said something about overshadowing that is not part of the planning, but also as well, the house next door, 247, I think it is, and plus the gardens as well to Riverside, the 2 houses there, they're not going to get much sunlight. They're perhaps getting, some throughout the day, but they're not going to get as much as they would do if that house wasn't there, because there's the sun, the positioning of the sun as it's going down. So in that respect, I think I would like to propose that it's refused, because there's a lot of things we've got to look at and to see what we can do. D1.
Is that a proposal?
It's a proposal, yeah, for refusal, yeah.
Do we have anybody that wishes to second that proposal?
Pardon? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you for helping. Yeah. Yeah. My real concern here is highways. Now, I know that we have to take note of highways and their suggestions. I also know that we're not obliged to follow it. It is advice. And I know that I have seen at least one I can remember very clearly where the council chose to ignore highways advice. It went to appeal and the appeal was not upheld. So members had got it right. But what really worries me here is that we've got a situation, we know that car ownership is increasing. We know that. And whereas a 3-bedroomed house might have had 1 car a while back, they could have 3 quite easily. There's going to be more and more parking in that road with the residents that are there. And although the proposed dwelling, they're going to have their own sort of sufficient, I would think, for 4 places for a 4-bedroom dwelling. But I know where I live, when I moved in there sort of 20 years ago, that there was plenty of road space, but more and more road space is being taken up by parking. And I think we're going to end up with this particular application, we'd end up with vehicles not being able to turn round, and we could well end up with them having to back out on to the main road, which highways would never want. That's the situation I think that we'd be.
Can I ask them what would
be my reason?
But what would be the amendment to the proposal? What would be the amendment to the proposal?
Well, I'm sure officers can find some wording, but the fact that
yeah, I'm just understanding how could. Unfortunately, I can't legislate against people owning cars. Yeah.
What's the harm? Well, I know highways think that there is serious harm when a vehicle will have to back out because and I've seen highways give reasons on Leicester Road, at a different part of Leicester Road, that's a known reasonable objection. The fact that the likelihood would be that vehicles would have to back out onto a major road.
Yeah, but this isn't a major road. I mean,
It is a major road. Asfordby Road is a major road.
yeah,
isn't it?
they're not backing out onto a Asfordby Road.
What I'm saying is, if the turning area disappears, they go how a vehicle would drive in. How are they going to get out? You know that they'd go onto their dwelling perhaps and turn on the dwelling on their car park. But a visitor who's parked, who's driven in, parked in, visited, and then
get the slide up and
I don't need this. I can't understand why you don't understand what I'm talking about.
I'm trying to understand what we would put in the proposal to legislate or to understand why we're refusing.
Because it would be a danger, and I certainly. It doesn't show the main road though, does it?
So whenever members are looking to refuse an application, that you need to be able to identify the harm, back it up by policy or a planning consideration, and give an explanation for that. So the first thing we need to do is actually understand what the harm is that you're saying. So I think if we bring the slide up, it might be easier for other members to actually visualise and see what you're trying to say, Councillor Cumbers.
Yeah, okay, but certainly I know at 1 Leicester Road, when there was a dwelling built, and it was only built on with the express proviso that there had to be a shared driveway to prevent vehicles having to go backwards onto the main road.
That's my point in the fact that that's a major road.
Well,
this isn't.
Isn't it a major road?
I don't think it's a question about the classification of the road. So you can see where the dwelling's proposed. Now, the dwelling's going to have so many car parking spaces. So what harm are we saying that if you were to allow this dwelling to be there, what harm would there be based on highways specifically? That's what we need to work out.
The harm is what's going to happen. You know, the fact that we can expect there to be more vehicles owned by the people living there. There'll be more parking, and you know, I think it's a reasonable reason.
So yeah, no, that's okay. So it's reasonable to expect that a new dwelling will require more parking spaces, and that's why the Leicestershire Highway Design Guide sets out how many spaces a dwelling or a new dwelling, a development, should create for itself. What we can't really do is look at the other properties because we're not losing spaces as far as I can see.
I'm not saying they are. I don't think that from the parking point of view, I don't think, you know, that new dwelling will have sufficient parking. I've got no problem there. But what I'm saying is that we're in a situation where car ownership is increasing. There's naturally going to be more parking in that road over the years. And there'll come a time when those vehicles will, unless someone introduces double yellow lines, that you'll get vehicles coming into Chetwynd and they have to leave, they're going to have to back out.
My professional advice is that you're going to struggle to come up to actually put that into a reason for refusal explicitly. It's okay. I think you're going to struggle to put that into a reason for refusal. But going back to the principle, obviously, Councillor Gordon has put forward the motion. So in any event, the motioner will have to be the one that accepts whether she wants to accept the highways part of that. My legal advice is that you wouldn't at the moment, because I don't think you're able to actually elaborate it in a way that can stand up at appeal, because we can't actually identify the specific harm caused by this dwelling.
I mean, I'm not qualified, but I do so disagree.
Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, I think possibly what you're trying to say is that where the, I mean, I could be wrong, this is just something, you know, but where the turning head is, the lady who I've been talking about at the house opposite 25 Chetwynd Drive, she sometimes has to have cars or vans park, you know, turn, but have to go on her property to manoeuvre. So sometimes there is difficulty at the turning head. And I think what you're trying to say is if that's used as a driveway, it could make it a bit more difficult, perhaps. So I'm not sure if it would make it any more difficult, but I think possibly there could be that it could do.
Yeah, I think what Marilyn has said is giving an example of what's already happening. You know, that.
Can I just go to Louise for a clarification? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and apologies if I've not got everything, but from what we've gathered within the debate that's being had, we think a reasonable 2 reasons for refusal based on the concerns that you've raised is, firstly, in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposed development would lead to unacceptable impacts on the highway, causing congestion and safety issues by virtue of additional parked cars on the highway, contrary to policy D1 of the Melton Local Plan. The additional vehicles caused by the development will lead to the likelihood of vehicles being unable to exit the development in a forward gear. The second reason for refusal is, in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposed development would be overbearing and cause undue shadowing of neighbouring properties and would not be of a suitable design to blend in with the street scene, contrary to policy D1 of the Melton Local Plan. Have I got everything there? Have I understood correctly?
Councillor Cumbers and then Councillor Olner.
Yeah, just to say, because most of this, I think, is going to be in the future. There are obviously problems already, but it's as much as anything, it's what's likely to be happening.
So in terms of that comment, we can't kind of have a crystal ball to condition the future. I think the point that we're making is the highway design guide and the spaces for minimum standards are there in terms of the parking that's being provided here on site. So what we're basically saying is the application can accommodate its own parking. Therefore, we don't raise the same concerns as you do. But what we've tried to do in there is take on your words saying additional vehicles, likelihood of vehicles being unable to exit the development in a forward gear. They're the things that we've picked up on from what you've been saying. But if I've got any of that wrong, please correct me.
I just know my experience with Leicester Road, and it was the same thing. In a way, we're always having to have a crystal ball, aren't we? We're always trying to think what might happen.
Councillor Olner, thank you. Sorry, can I just go back to Councillor Olner? He's been waiting a long time.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'm one of the local members, but I have approached this application on its merits and not, without any sort of lobbying as per se, and I have visited the site. I'm also very grateful to the officers for answering my questions that I posed since the briefing based upon information that I've gathered from local residents. I'm extremely grateful for being corrected on my understanding of backland development, because since leaving council work and coming back to it, I hadn't taken on board the fact that in 2012 this was dropped from our range of tools that we could resist applications with. But I heard Louise just say in her suggestions about what we should link our objections to, the question of overbearing, and I think that picked up on Councillor Pritchard's remark, and it's I think irrespective of badgers, which I accept is an issue in wildlife, it always is, but it's just the mass, what we used to call the mass of the proposal in the landscape there is out of keeping with the historic nature of that area. It's a sort of carbuncle on the side of it, I understand the reasons for wanting to develop it. That's quite legitimate, and I don't blame anyone for trying to do that. But I think it's just out of keeping, and I think that the wording I heard about it being overbearing captures that sentiment. If there's anything else you can add to that in terms of the mass or the it being out of keeping, that's the flavour of it as far as I'm concerned. And I will vote against. Well, I'll vote for the motion if that's the motion we're voting on. But I will vote against the application, having heard all the arguments and read a great deal on this. I think it's a difficult one, as members have said. But I think that for me, that's how I shall approach this.
I just come back to Councillor Gordon, because we need to come back to say, are you happy with the proposal, with the amendments that have been made so far?
I am, but also I don't know whether we should mention about the gradient as well, and also about the water logging.
The water logging is outside of the application area, so
well, it would come from there.
The draining was mentioned in the report, in the fact that there's a drainage report needed.
Right.
So,
the gradient would go in, would it? Because the gradient is one of the main things as well.
Councillor Allnutt?
Chair, can I just ask, when we're assessing harm, it can be harm to neighbours, can't it?
Yeah.
So Councillor Gordon's right in this sense that if she perceives that the building will cause more surface water to be pouring over neighbours, that's a harm to them, isn't it? So if or not, the
only difference is the increased harm, is my understanding. No, if the area is already flooding, which is what Councillor Gordon said, would this application increase that harm? That's what I meant by that statement. Is that, yeah.
If members are inclined to include that, then I would strongly stress that you have an evidence to support that. And in addition, I believe that there's a condition in there about drainage in any event. So the standard practice that you should not refuse an application where you can condition the issue. So if you can condition the issue out, then you shouldn't be including that within a reason for refusal.
Yeah. One thing I would like to come back on the fact that the statement on overbearing, and this is my personal opinion now, in the fact that this building is below the height of the adjacent building on Chetwynd Drive, and then I'm sure there could be the height of it is below. No, the proposed building is below the height of Chetwynd Drive. Asfordby, well, no, but both and Chetwynd Drive. Okay, I need to go back to clarification on this. Can we look at the slide with the side elevation? So again, this is the one you were talking about, Councillor Allnutt, the blue one. Yeah. If I look at that, what I took from that, and I just need to clarify that, is that the roof height of the building in the middle, which is the new build, is below the roof height of the building on the left, which is the one on Chetwynd Drive. Is that correct? Now that could be, so the comments about, I'm just questioning the comments about overbearing. The question is about design, because the Chetwynd Drive because basically it becomes on Chetwynd Drive. So I'm just questioning those. I want to make sure that we understand that, as I understand it, that roof height there is to scale, and so the roof height is below Chetwynd Drive. Yeah.
No, I think you're wrong, because it comes down like this. Sorry.
But what we're seeing now is an indicative section. It's not an actual section. So that doesn't mean to say it would apply, would it? And if I may say so, overbearing is not just about height, it's about breadth and the stature in the setting, if you see what I mean. So I think overbearing is a satisfactory approach to it.
Chair, Councillor Ornett raises a good point there, because there is other things to be considered. I don't feel that they have been drawn out here yet. We've got the the adjectives say that it's going to be overbearing and whatnot and cause undue shadowing, but I don't think that that's been pulled out in any form of evidence. So if that was to go to appeal, I'm not sure how you'd be able to defend that. It's easy to say something is overbearing, but you need to be able to back that up further. And at the moment, both reasons for refusal, I would say, are quite weak. If you were to take those to appeal as is without any better evidence, you are going into the realms of an unreasonable decision. I've got to give you that warning at this point.
Councillor Atherton.
So unless I've misread it, 10.9 covers the site levels and the height of the new the proposed dwelling in relation to its neighbours, and that a plan must be agreed before building can commence. And I don't believe that indicative section meets the requirement of condition 10.9. So we've perhaps covered in relation to the overbearing nature in relation to height of the proposed property against its neighbours.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, I just have to emphasise that it's on a gradient that goes down. So where you've got the houses on Chetwynd Drive, they've got to be lower than that one, because that one's slightly higher. And also Riverside 1 and 2, they are a lot lower. I mean, I've stood in there where their patio is, and you can't believe just how low you are to that.
Again, I just want to clarify then my understanding of this diagram. If you look at the area in blue on the screen, sorry, I'm looking at the one behind you. That's why I was, yeah. So, and then you look at the line that's coming down as an angle, the thin black line, that's the existing garden. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Brown.
We've got a proposer a second. Can we go to the vote? Because we're going around in circles here. I know what the officers saying, but at the end of the day, it is a committee decision, so it's up to the committee to propose a second to be unless people want a debate going on, just to see where it ends up.
We also need to have a defendable.
Well, you've got
one. Yeah.
I'll need.
Yeah, thank you. I apologise because it does feel like we are dragging this out, but I've got to put you in the position as if you were in an appeal, and an inspector would say, is the issue here the eaves height? And if so, why can't that be conditioned out? That's the only issue, because that's the only thing that seems to be gaining any sort of traction at the moment.
Councillor Cumbers.
Another point about the water, that the less land there is for the rain to soak into, the worse possible flooding will be. And of course, we're talking here about quite a substantial house with quite a substantial sort of footage, and quite a reduction of grass area that would soak up that water.
Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think as Councillor Brown said, so just for clarity for me, I think there's too many reasons for refusal, which will mean the motion. I can't support the motion. I do understand, though, where I think Councillor Ornett and Councillor Atherton may have been trying to tease out in the debate about scale and massing. And I think Louise did get that kind of reason very nailed on. Because if this was a bungalow, so to speak, or a dormer house, I think then it wouldn't be an issue. But I can't support all the reasons that's been put forward for the motion. So I'll be voting against the motion because of I think, as Councillor Pritchard said many times before, when you throw the kitchen sink at it, it usually lands on your head.
Okay, so we have the proposal, we have a seconder, we have the conditions, which is everybody happy with that at the moment? So I'd like to take this to the vote. The proposal to refuse the application. All those in favour of refusing the application? All those against the Keep your hands up. Yeah. This is for refusal. Yeah. Yeah. Those against the proposal for refusal? 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. So that's 4 to 5. So the motion is carried. Is that to that question? Sorry. Oh, sorry, the motion fails. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that refusal motion failed. Does that mean another refusal motion cannot be put forward?
Yeah, no, it just needs to be different, a different proposal. That's the only thing.
So the question that we need to sort of come back to debate on this is the proposal is, or the position we are in now is to either find different reasons for refusal, reasons why we need to possibly defer this, but what we need to know, what do we want to know before it comes back, and be precise about that, or a proposal to accept with conditions, different conditions.
Propose that we defer in order to find out more detail about the height of this building, the actual height, not the indicative height.
Could that not be carried through in conditions?
Looking for a deferral, not a refusal.
Councillor Higgins?
I'm happy to second that, because I think we need to understand more of the scale and massing of it, and then the height levels, not indicative, specific, and breadth of it. Thank you, Louise. Thanks. We've been making you guys work hard.
So, the issues largely around the scale and height and the word indicative. Can I just make sure I've got all of the detail together? So a deferral for more detail about the actual height of the development to find out more about the scale and massing. So that will be the height of the proposed dwelling, and for members to then consider the impact of that in terms of scale and massing. Is there anything else?
Oh, sorry.
We'll stick with the proposer first, but go.
It just struck me that since the discussion around wildlife focused on the fact that a county council officer had given advice, but that local opinion was that contrary to that advice, it might be an opportunity to go back to the county officer and say, look, could you reassess this based on local knowledge of observations of I would say observations of wildlife. I think that would be helpful, although it's in some ways marginal, but I think it would be helpful. Just that one.
And which one wants to go first? Councillor Higgins.
As a second of the motion, I'll be very charitable and I'll accept seconding that amendment as well. That also, when we said about the scale and I think in relation to the neighbouring properties, I think we need that. So, for example, the houses on Chetwynd Drive, maybe the houses, I may have the road wrong, is it Riverside and then obviously Asfordby, which I think we've got the Asfordby one, but if we got all that, I think we can then make a decision. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Pritchett.
Saying the same thing, you need to be able to relate it to the environment around it, not just its own size and mass. You have to relate it to.
I will also, sorry, Councillor Gancy.
Yes, when it does come back, I'd like to see specific drawings on how it does relate to surrounding buildings, windows, doors, etc. Everything, so that we can actually be sure of what we may be considering. Okay, thank you.
Would we want also any further information about potential flooding or increased harm to flooding. So it's conditioned anyway. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Glancy, can you repeat your request in terms of design, because I didn't quite catch it?
Yes, it was specific drawings as to how the proposed building fits in with its surrounding vernacular, as in which way the windows are going to face as they're going to various buildings around it, and the roof heights, distances, etc. Something that we would look at if we were looking at a drawing of a large planning application. We would then judge how it fits in, and we haven't got that at the moment. We've got a total blank sheet. Thank you. Yeah, I can see that perhaps the idea of the highways aspect isn't very sort of popular with members, but I would like to know exactly how wide Chetwynd Drive is, and would it actually hold? Is it wide enough for a car parked on one side, a car parked on the other? Is it wide enough for a vehicle to go through the middle?
Yeah, so we can get dimensions, etc. Councillor Glancy.
Just suddenly thought, in the report it mentions that there's 3 parking spaces and we've all been talking about 4. So can we just have that clarified as well, please?
Yes, because the applicant actually mentioned 4.
Yeah, but it says in the report it's 3. So that does need to be clarified. Unless that includes the garage, of course.
Louise, do you want to?
Yeah, if I can just clarify that I've got everything. So defer for more detail about the actual height of the development, to find out more about the scale and massing and how the development will fit in with the surroundings on Asfordby Road, Chetwynd Drive and Riverside Road, and also clarification of number and dimensions of car parking spaces. Is that correct?
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, what the chair said, if we can have clarification on other flooding as well, please.
The thing, sorry, I followed on, but that it's already conditioned.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
okay.
that was my mistake. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Lovey.
In that case, then the motion proposed by Councillor Allnut, seconded, and you're happy with those conditions, with those the wording?
Include the ecological bit, did it? About checking with the county.
And observations of wildlife in the area. Yeah, my apologies.
The motion was seconded by...
Go on, yeah, well, yeah. I'll go for that.
Yeah. In that case, then, I'd like to go for the vote for this proposal to defer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. Those against? 1. Those abstained? 1. So the motion is carried. The application is deferred. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for your input. And thank all the councillors for another night's work. Thank you very much. And thank you for the officers.